Welcome to Crime Stories for Sleep. Tonight, before we begin, I want to ask you something simple. Where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Think about that quietly, let the question settle, and when you're ready, allow yourself to drift into the story. The city breathes differently after midnight. Not the sharp inhale of morning rush or the heavy exhale of evening traffic, but something deeper, more measured. Like an old man settling into his favorite chair, the urban landscape allows itself to sag into comfortable shadows. Street lamps cast pools of amber light that barely touch the edges of darkness between them, creating a rhythm of illumination and void that pulses gently through. Empty boulevards dot in the downtown precinct building on Maple Street. The third-floor windows glow with a soft institutional fluorescence. The building itself is unremarkable, constructed in that practical style of the 1960s, when form followed function with no apology for beauty. Brick facade weathered to a dusty brown, windows arranged in perfect rectangles, a structure that speaks of steady purpose rather than architectural ambition. During daylight hours, it buzzes with the controlled chaos of police work. But now in these quiet hours before dawn, it settles into a different kind of productivity. The elevator moves with mechanical precision between floors, its cables humming a low note that vibrates through the building's bones. On the third floor, the doors part to reveal a corridor lined with doors bearing frosted glass panels, each marked with department, names in black lettering that has faded slightly over the decades. Records, archives, cold cases, evidence storage. The words themselves seem to exhale history. Detective Sarah Chun's footsteps echo softly against polished linoleum as she makes her way toward the archives. Her shift ended 2 hours ago, but sleep has been elusive lately, and the quiet building offers a different kind of rest. She carries a cup of coffee that has long since cooled, more talisman than beverage, and her key ring jangles with the soft music of metal against metal. The archives occupy a corner of the building where two hallways meet, creating an L-shaped room that stretches further back than initially apparent. Rows of filing cabinets stand like silent sentinels, their metal surfaces reflecting the overhead lights in muted gleams. Each cabinet bears labels written in various hands, some typed on mechanical typewriters, others handwritten in the careful script of earlier decades. The progression of time is visible in these small details. The evolution from fountain pen to ballpoint to computer printouts. A quiet archaeology of administrative practice. Chun settles into the wooden chair behind the desk that serves as the room's focal point. The desk itself tells stories through its accumulated imperfections. Coffee rings ghosted into the wood grain. Scratches from decades of case files being slid across its surface. A small burn mark near the left corner where someone once rested a cigarette. The lamp beside her computer casts a warm circle of light that doesn't quite reach the far corners of the room, leaving those spaces to exist in comfortable shadow. She opens the first drawer of the nearest filing cabinet with the gentle care of someone handling something precious. The files inside are arranged chronologically, each folder thick with papers that have yellowed slightly at the edges. The oldest cases date back to the early 1970s, when the city was smaller and the crime simpler, if crime can ever truly be called simple. These cases exist now as paper memories, reduced to typed reports and handwritten notes. Black and white photographs clipped to manila folders with rust-spotted paper clips. The first file she withdraws concerns a burglary from 1973. The report, typed on an IBM Selectric, describes the methodical removal of valuables from a home on Elm Street while the family attended Sunday church services. The investigating officer, Detective William Hayes, recorded his observations in precise, measured language that suggests a man comfortable with the weight of detail. He noted the absence of forced entry, the careful selection of items taken, the way furniture had been moved and then repositioned, as if the intruder had tried to minimize the evidence of his presence. What strikes Chin most about these old reports is not the crimes themselves, but the texture of the world they describe. The addresses reference streets that have since been renamed or demolished. The telephone numbers follow patterns that no longer exist. The social security numbers contain fewer digits. Even the language carries the formal weight of an earlier era. When police reports read more like official documents than the efficient bullet points favored by modern departments, she imagines Detective Hayes at his desk, hunting and pecking at the typewriter keys, pausing to consider his word choices, unable to simply delete and retip as she might do today. Each sentence had to be considered fully before commitment to paper, and corrections required either starting over or living with the small imperfections of correction fluid and strikeovers. The very act of documentation required more patience, more deliberation. The burglary case resolved itself within a week when the perpetrator, emboldened by his success, attempted a similar crime in broad daylight and was spotted by a neighbor. The resolution fills barely half a page. Suspect apprehended, evidence recovered, case closed. But the bulk of the file consists of Detective Hayes' careful mapping of the crime scene, his interviews with neighbors, his methodical checking and cross-checking of details that ultimately proved unnecessary for solving the case, but created a complete picture of a moment in time. Chun replaces the file and selects another. This one, from 1975, documents a case of vandalism at the high school. Windows broken, walls spray-painted with messages that seem quaint now in their earnest rebellion. The investigating officer, Detective Margaret Foster, was one of the first women on the force, and her reports carry a different tone, perhaps more attuned to the social dynamics that might have motivated the crime. She interviewed not just potential suspects, but teachers, administrators, even the janitor who discovered the damage. Detective Foster's notes reveal a methodical mind at work, but also something more intuitive. She recorded not just what people said, but how they said it, noting hesitations and inconsistencies that suggested deeper currents beneath the surface of teenage vandalism. Her investigation revealed that the damage occurred during a period of tension between different social groups within the school, a conflict that had been simmering for months without adult recognition. The case was never formally solved, but Detective Foster's final report suggests she understood the vandalism as a symptom rather than isolated incident. Her recommendations included increased counseling resources and better communication between school administration and student groups. Whether these recommendations were implemented is not recorded in the file, but their presence suggests a detective who saw beyond the immediate crime to the community conditions that might have fostered it. As Chun reads through these old cases, she begins to notice patterns that have nothing to do with criminal activity. The paper itself tells a story of changing technology and budget constraints. Early reports are typed on heavy bond paper that has held up well over the decades. By the 1980s, the paper becomes thinner, more economical, and some reports show signs of dot matrix printing with its characteristic perforated edges. Photographs transition from black and white to color, and their quality improves dramatically as camera technology advances. The language in the reports evolves as well. Early files are written in formal, almost Victorian prose, while later reports adopt the clipped, efficient style that dominates modern police work. But reading these documents in sequence reveals something lost in the transition to efficiency. The older reports, despite their formal language, often contain more complete pictures of the communities where crimes occurred, more context for understanding not just what happened, but why it might have happened. A case from 1978 illustrates this point. A series of small thefts from local businesses initially appeared random and opportunistic. The investigating detective, James Morrison, could have simply documented the thefts and moved on when they stopped as suddenly as they had begun. Instead, he spent weeks mapping the businesses affected, interviewing owners and employees, walking the routes between locations at different times of day and night. Detective Morrison's investigation revealed that all the thefts occurred during a narrow window when a particular bus route changed its schedule, leaving several blocks less populated during the early evening hours. He identified the likely perpetrator not through fingerprints or witness identification, but by understanding the rhythm of the neighborhood and recognizing how a schedule change had created a temporary opportunity. The case was never prosecuted because the theft stopped when the bus schedule returned to normal, suggesting that the crimes were indeed opportunistic rather than planned. But Detective Morrison's file contains detailed maps of foot traffic patterns, charts of business operating hours, and interviews with bus drivers and regular passengers. His investigation created a portrait of a small commercial district adapting to change, with crime emerging from the temporary disruption of established patterns. Chun finds herself drawn to these cases not for their criminal content, but for their depiction of a city in transition. Each file is a snapshot of urban life at a particular moment, capturing details that no one thought to preserve deliberately. The businesses mentioned in reports from the 1970s include establishments that closed decades ago, Woolworths, locally owned pharmacies, small grocery stores that were eventually displaced by chain supermarkets. The addresses themselves tell stories of neighborhood change. Streets that were primarily residential in early reports gradually show more commercial activity in later files. Vacant lots mentioned in passing eventually become parking lots, then strip malls, then more substantial developments. The crimes documented in these files provide inadvertent witness to the city's physical evolution. A file from 1981 documents a break-in at a corner store on what was then a quiet residential street. The report notes that the store was one of only 3 commercial establishments in a 6-block area, and that the break-in occurred during a power outage that left the neighborhood in darkness for several hours. Reading this case against more recent files from the same area reveals a dramatically transformed landscape. That quiet residential street now forms part of a busy commercial corridor, and power outages are quickly addressed by improved electrical infrastructure. The detective who investigated the 1981 break-in, Robert Kim, included in his report a detailed description of the neighborhood on the night of the crime. He noted which houses showed lights, indicating residents who had backup power sources. He documented the lack of street lighting and the way darkness pooled in areas that would normally be illuminated. His report reads almost like poetry in its attention to the interplay between light and shadow, presence and absence. Detective Kim's investigation ultimately determined that the break-in was committed by someone familiar with the neighborhood, someone who knew about the building's back entrance and understood which residents were likely to be away during the evening hours. The case was solved when the perpetrator, a local teenager, was caught trying to sell stolen merchandise to acquaintances. But Detective Kim's file contains much more than the facts necessary for prosecution. His interviews with neighbors revealed a community still adjusting to the presence of commercial activity on what had been a purely residential street. Some residents welcomed the convenience of nearby shopping, while others worried about increased traffic and the potential for crime that businesses might attract. The break-in itself became a focal point for these anxieties, transforming a simple crime into a symbol of broader changes affecting the neighborhood. Chun notices that these older files often contain such social context, as if the detectives understood that crimes occurred within communities, and that understanding the community was essential to understanding the crime. Modern police reports, in contrast, tend to focus more narrowly on the criminal act itself, documenting evidence and witness statements with efficient precision but less attention to the broader social environment. This difference reflects changes in police work itself. Modern departments handle larger caseloads with smaller staffs, requiring efficiency that leaves little time for the kind of comprehensive community mapping found in these older files. Computer databases allow for quick cross-referencing of information, but they also tend to compartmentalize data in ways that make broader patterns less visible. A case from 1983 demonstrates the value of the older approach. A series of car break-ins appeared to be random, scattered across different neighborhoods with no obvious connection. Detective Lisa Warren spent weeks charting the locations, times, and circumstances of each incident. Her investigation revealed that all the break-ins occurred within a 3-block radius of bus stops used by workers commuting to a factory that had recently changed its shift schedule. Detective Warren's breakthrough came not from forensic evidence, but from understanding how the shift change affected commuting patterns. Workers who had previously driven to work were now taking public transportation to avoid rush hour traffic, leaving their cars parked in residential neighborhoods during daylight hours. The break-ins stopped when the factory returned to its original schedule. But Detective Warren's file contains a detailed analysis of how employment patterns affect neighborhood dynamics. Her report includes interviews with factory workers, bus drivers, and residents of the affected neighborhoods. She documented not just the crimes, but the social and economic factors that created the conditions for those crimes. Her investigation reveals a detective who understood that effective police work required knowledge of the community's rhythms and pressures. Chun finds herself staying later than intended, drawn into these paper windows on the city's past. The archives remain quiet around her, the silence broken only by the soft whisper of pages turning and the distant hum of the building's heating system. Outside the windows, the city continues its slow rotation toward dawn. But here in this room filled with yellowed files and metal cabinets, time moves differently. Each case file represents hours of investigation, weeks of following leads, months of paperwork and court proceedings compressed into manila folders. But together, they form something larger than the sum of their individual parts. They create a portrait of a city learning how to live with itself, adapting to growth and change, finding ways to maintain order and safety, while accommodating the inevitable disruptions that come with human community. The coffee in Chun's cup has grown cold, but she barely notices. She has found a rhythm in her reading, a gentle progression from file to file that requires no particular destination. Some cases intrigue her more than others, but all of them contribute to her growing sense of the city as a living entity, shaped by countless individual actions and decisions documented in these quiet files. A case from 1985 catches her attention for its unusual thoroughness. Detective Michael Santos investigated what appeared to be a simple case of graffiti vandalism, but discovered connections to a larger pattern of youth unrest related to school closures and budget cuts. His file contains not just police reports, but copies of school board meeting minutes, newspaper articles about education funding, and interviews with community leaders. Detective Santos's investigation revealed that the graffiti was not random vandalism, but a form of protest by students displaced by school closures. The messages spray-painted on walls contained references to specific budget decisions and educational policies. What had initially appeared to be simple property damage was actually political expression by young people who felt their voices were not being heard through conventional channels. Case was resolved when Detective Santos helped arrange a meeting between the student protesters and city council members. No charges were filed, but the graffiti stopped, and several of the students became involved in legitimate advocacy efforts. Santos's file documents not just a successful resolution, but a detective's recognition that sometimes the best police work involves understanding the difference between symptoms and causes. Chun realizes that she has been reading for hours, but the time has passed without her awareness. The archives have created their own temporal environment, where past and present exist simultaneously on paper and in memory. Each file she opens transports her to a different moment in the city's history. A different configuration of streets and buildings. Problems and solutions that the room around her has grown familiar in these hours of quiet reading. She knows now which filing cabinet drawers stick slightly, which fluorescent light flickers intermittently, which chair at the research table wobbles on an uneven leg. The space has welcomed her into its particular rhythm. The pace of careful documentation and patient investigation that characterizes police work at its best. As she prepares to close the files and return them to their cabinet, Chun reflects on what she has learned from these hours among the archives. The crimes themselves are largely forgettable, small violations of property and order that were resolved or not resolved, according to the availability of evidence and the skill of the investigators. But the world these files reveal is vivid and complex. A city caught in the process of becoming what it is today. The detectives who created these files were artists of a particular kind. Painters working in words and facts to create portraits of their community. Their canvases were report forms and manila folders. Their pigments the careful observations and patient interviews that transformed raw events into comprehensible narratives. Some were more skilled than others, but all contributed to the collective. Memory stored in these quiet cabinets, Chun returns the last file to its proper place and closes the cabinet drawer with a soft metallic sound that seems to echo longer than it should. The archives settle back into their patient silence, waiting for the next reader to discover the stories they contain. Outside the windows, the first hint of dawn touches the horizon, painting the sky in subtle shades that will soon give way to the bright clarity of morning. She gathers her things and prepares to leave, but pauses at the doorway for a final look at the room that has sheltered her through these quiet hours. The filing cabinets stand in their orderly rows, each containing thousands of pages that document the city's patient work of maintaining order and safety. Tomorrow night, or perhaps the night after, she will return to continue her exploration of this paper archive. This collection of moments preserved in careful detail by detectives who understood that their work was both practical and historical. The elevator carries her down through the sleeping building, past floors where other night shift workers maintain their own vigilant watch over the city's needs. The lobby is empty except for the security guard who nods as she passes, recognizing another person who finds comfort in the quiet hours, when the city's true character emerges from behind the busy mask it wears during the day. Outside, the streets are beginning to show signs of the coming day. Early commuters wait at bus stops, and the first delivery trucks navigate the empty boulevards. But for a few more hours, the night will maintain its gentle hold on the city and in the archives above. The files will continue their patient documentation of all the ways human beings find to live together in the complicated proximity of urban life. Chun walks toward her car, carrying with her the weight of stories absorbed during her hours among the files. Each case she read tonight will join the others in her memory, contributing to her understanding of the city she has chosen to serve and protect. The archives have taught her that police work is ultimately about more than solving crimes. It is about understanding communities, recognizing patterns, and preserving the fragile order that allows diverse groups of people to share limited space with minimal conflict. The city continues its slow rotation toward morning, and somewhere in office buildings and police stations, other people are awake in the quiet hours, maintaining the systems and services that keep urban life functioning smoothly. The crimes documented in the archives are part of this larger story, disruptions in the city's rhythm that required patient attention and careful resolution. As Chun starts her car and begins the drive home, she carries with her a deeper appreciation for the work that has gone before her. The careful documentation and patient investigation that previous generations of detectives contributed to the city's collective memory. The files in the archives are more than administrative records. They are the city's autobiography, written one case at a time by people who understood that their daily work was contributing to something larger than themselves. The night is ending, but the stories contained in those yellowed files will continue their quiet existence, waiting for the next reader to discover the patterns and connections that reveal how a city learns to live with itself over time. The morning after Detective Chun's first night in the archives found her returning to the third floor with a different purpose. The quiet hours she had spent among the old case files had awakened something in her understanding of police work, a recognition that the reports themselves held as much meaning as the crimes they documented. She carried with her now a small notebook, its pages blank and waiting to capture patterns that might emerge from systematic reading rather than casual browsing. The archives welcomed her back with their familiar silence, the filing cabinets standing like patient librarians, ready to share their accumulated knowledge. But today, Chun approached them with the methodical attention of an investigator, beginning not with random selection, but with the first drawer of the first cabinet. Prepared to read chronologically through the department's documented history, the earliest police reports in the collection dated to 1971. When the city had consolidated several smaller police departments into the current unified force. These initial reports bore the careful formality of officers conscious that they were establishing precedents, creating templates that would guide police documentation for decades to come. Each report followed a rigid structure: incident classification, responding officers, time and location, witness statements, evidence collected, preliminary conclusions. Follow-up actions required. Detective Harold Morrison, who appeared to be one of the department's first report writers, approached documentation with the precision of someone who understood that paperwork was not merely administrative duty, but foundational to effective law enforcement. His reports from 1971 and 1972 read like instruction manuals for proper police procedure, each section completed with careful attention to detail that left no room for ambiguity or misinterpretation. Chun found herself drawn not just to the crimes Morrison investigated, but to his methodology of documentation. A simple shoplifting case from March 1972 filled 4 complete pages, with Morrison recording not only the basic facts of the theft, but detailed descriptions of the store layout, the positioning of merchandise, the sight lines available to employees and customers, the lighting conditions at the time of the incident, and the traffic patterns that might have affected the perpetrators' opportunity and escape route. Morrison's approach revealed a detective who understood that crimes occurred within specific physical and social contexts, and that effective investigation required mapping those contexts as thoroughly as documenting the criminal acts themselves. His report on the shoplifting case included interviews with 3 employees, 2 customers who had been in the store at the time, and the store manager. Each interview was recorded separately, with careful attention to chronology and perspective. What made Morrison's reports particularly valuable was his practice of including seemingly irrelevant details that later proved significant. In the shoplifting case, he noted that the store had recently changed its music system, playing louder background music that may have masked the sounds of the theft. He documented the fact that a nearby construction project had altered parking availability, forcing customers to park further away and potentially affecting foot traffic patterns through the store. These details, which a less thorough investigator might have dismissed as unimportant, provided Morrison with the context needed to understand how the crime occurred and to develop strategies for preventing similar incidents. His final report included recommendations for store security that addressed not just the immediate theft, but the environmental factors that had made it possible. Chun realized that Morrison's reports served as blueprints for community-oriented police work, showing how individual crimes could be understood as symptoms of broader social and economic conditions. His documentation style required patience and time that modern police departments rarely afforded their officers, but the results justified the investment. Morrison's clearance rate was notably higher than his contemporaries, and his cases showed fewer repeat offenses in the areas he patrolled. The evolution of police reports through the 1970s reflected changes, not just in department policy but in the broader culture of law enforcement. Early reports like Morrison's treated documentation as investigation, with writing serving as a tool for understanding rather than simply recording. Later reports, influenced by efficiency demands and increased caseloads, began to adopt more streamlined approaches that captured essential information but sacrificed the contextual depth that made Morrison's work so effective. Detective Patricia Wells, who joined the force in 1974, represented a transitional approach to police documentation. Her reports maintained Morrison's attention to detail, but organized information more efficiently, using standardized forms and coded classifications that allowed for quicker completion without sacrificing thoroughness. Wells developed a system of abbreviations and shorthand that became adopted by other officers, creating the foundation for modern police report writing. Wells's innovation was recognizing that thorough documentation could be achieved through better organization rather than simply longer reports. She created templates for different types of incidents, with specific sections for physical evidence, witness statements, environmental factors, and follow-up requirements. Her system allowed officers to complete comprehensive reports in less time while ensuring that no important categories of information were overlooked. Asterisk. Domestic disturbance case from 1975 demonstrated Wells's systematic approach. Rather than writing a narrative description of the incident, she organized her report into clearly labeled sections that addressed the legal elements of the case, the immediate safety concerns, the underlying family dynamics, and the community resources that might help prevent future incidents. Each section contained specific, factual information presented in consistent format that made the report easy to read and understand. Wells's reports also showed greater sensitivity to the human dimensions of police work. Where Morrison's documentation focused primarily on physical evidence and procedural correctness, Wells included more attention to the emotional and psychological impacts of crime on victims and witnesses. Her domestic disturbance report noted the presence of children in the home, the apparent history of previous conflicts, and the availability of social services that might address underlying problems. This attention to human factors reflected broader changes in police training during the 1970s, as law enforcement began to incorporate insights from social work and psychology. Wells's report suggested an officer who understood that effective police work required not just law enforcement, but community support and intervention. Her cases showed lower rates of repeat calls and higher victim satisfaction, indicating that her comprehensive approach produced better outcomes for all involved. The filing cabinets revealed other innovations in police documentation during this period. Detective James Rodriguez, who specialized in property crimes, developed detailed mapping systems that tracked patterns across different neighborhoods and time periods. His reports included hand-drawn diagrams showing the locations of multiple related crimes, with notations about factors like lighting, traffic, and proximity to schools or businesses. Rodriguez's mapping approach allowed him to identify crime patterns that might not be apparent from individual case reports. A series of bicycle thefts that initially appeared random revealed clear patterns when Rodriguez plotted their locations and times on detailed neighborhood maps. The thefts clustered around schools during after-school hours and near recreational areas during evening hours, suggesting a perpetrator who was familiar with local activity patterns. The visual elements of Rodriguez's reports made them particularly effective for briefing other officers and for court presentations. His diagrams and maps provided immediate, understanding of spatial relationships that would have required pages of written description. This approach influenced department policy, leading to the adoption of standardized mapping protocols that remained in use decades. Later, Chun noticed that the most effective reports from this period shared certain characteristics. Regardless of the individual officer's style, they treated documentation as analysis rather than simple record keeping. They included sufficient context to make crimes understandable as events occurring within specific communities at particular moments in time. They balanced efficiency with thoroughness, finding ways to capture essential information without sacrificing the detail needed for effective investigation and prosecution. Reports also reflected the personalities and professional philosophies of their authors. Detective Morrison's methodical precision, Detective Wells's systematic organization, and Detective Rodriguez's visual thinking all produced effective documentation, but each approached the task differently. This diversity of styles within consistent professional standards suggested a department that valued individual expertise while maintaining quality control. A particularly interesting case from 1976 illustrated how different documentation styles could complement each other. During complex investigations, a series of burglaries in the downtown business district required coordination among multiple detectives, each bringing different skills and approaches to the investigation. Detective Morrison provided detailed scene analysis and evidence documentation. Detective Wells organized witness statements and coordinated with victims. Detective Rodriguez mapped the burglaries and identified patterns. The combined investigation file showed how collaborative police work could benefit from diverse documentation styles. Morrison's thorough scene reports provided the foundation for physical evidence analysis. Wells's systematic witness interviews revealed connections between different burglaries that might otherwise have been missed. Rodriguez's maps identified the geographical logic underlying the crime spree, leading to the eventual apprehension of the perpetrator. The case file also demonstrated how proper documentation could support successful prosecution. Each detective's reports contributed different elements needed for court presentation: physical evidence, witness testimony, and pattern analysis. The comprehensive documentation allowed prosecutors to build a strong case that resulted in conviction and appropriate sentencing. As Chen read through these collaborative case files, she began to understand how individual police reports functioned as components of larger investigative narratives. Each report provided one piece of a puzzle that could only be completed through careful coordination and communication among multiple officers. The quality of individual documentation directly affected the success of collaborative investigations. The late 1970s brought technological changes that began to influence police report writing. The introduction of portable tape recorders allowed officers to dictate initial reports while still at crime scenes, capturing immediate impressions and details that might be forgotten during the time required to return to the station and complete paperwork. This technology improved the accuracy and completeness of initial incident reports, though it also required officers to develop new skills in oral communication and organization. Detective Susan Kim, who joined the force in 1978, was among the first to effectively integrate tape recording technology into her documentation practice. Her reports from this period showed greater immediacy and detail in describing crime scenes, witness statements, and environmental conditions. The technology allowed her to capture information more efficiently while maintaining the thoroughness that characterized the best police documentation. Kim's innovation was using tape recordings not just for initial incident reports, but for ongoing case notes and investigation updates. She developed a system of audio case files that supplemented written reports with detailed verbal observations and analysis. This approach proved particularly valuable for complex cases that developed over extended periods, allowing her to maintain continuity and identify connections that might be missed in purely written documentation. The transition to audio supplemented reporting required adjustments in department procedures and evidence handling. Tape recordings had to be transcribed, stored, and made available for court proceedings. The technology offered advantages in terms of efficiency and completeness, but it also introduced new administrative requirements and potential technical problems. Chun found audio transcripts from Kim's cases particularly revealing of the investigative process. The immediacy of recorded observations captured details and impressions that written reports often sanitized or organized out of existence. Kim's voice recordings revealed the uncertainty, frustration, and gradual understanding that characterized real detective work, in contrast to the confident conclusions typically presented in final written reports. A burglary investigation from 1979 demonstrated both the advantages and challenges of audio documentation. Kim's initial tape-recorded observations at the crime scene captured details about lighting, weather conditions, and neighborhood activity that proved crucial to understanding how the crime occurred. Her recorded interviews with witnesses revealed emotional nuances and contradictions that might have been lost in written summaries. However, the same case also showed the limitations of audio documentation. Technical problems with recording equipment resulted in lost information during one crucial witness interview. Transcription errors introduced inaccuracies that required time-consuming corrections. The volume of audio material made it difficult for other officers to quickly access specific information needed for follow-up investigation. These early experiments with audio documentation foreshadowed later technological changes in police work, particularly the introduction of computer systems and digital recording. The lessons learned during this transitional period influenced department policies for adopting new technologies while maintaining the quality and accessibility of police records. The end of the 1970s marked a significant shift in police documentation practices, influenced by budget constraints, increased caseloads, and pressure for greater efficiency. Reports from 1979 and 1980 showed gradual movement away from the comprehensive documentation style exemplified by detectives like Morrison and Wells toward more streamlined approaches that prioritize speed and standardization over detailed analysis. This transition reflected broader changes in policing philosophy and public expectations. Communities demanded quicker response to crimes and faster case resolution, leaving less time for the thorough investigation and documentation that had characterized earlier police work. Administrative pressures encouraged officers to handle more cases in less time, requiring more efficient documentation methods that could maintain legal sufficiency while reducing time investment. Detective Carol Peterson, who began working in 1980, represented the new generation of officers who had to balance thorough investigation with efficiency requirements. Her reports showed skill in identifying and documenting essential information, while avoiding the extensive contextual analysis that earlier detectives had time to provide. Peterson developed techniques for rapid scene assessment and witness interviewing that captured crucial details without requiring hours of documentation time. Peterson's approach proved effective for handling high-volume caseloads, but it also represented a loss of the community knowledge and analytical depth that had distinguished the best police work of the previous decade. Her reports solved immediate investigative and legal requirements but provided less insight into the social and environmental factors that contributed to crime in specific neighborhoods. The filing cabinets contained hundreds of reports from this transitional period, each reflecting individual officers' attempts to maintain professional standards while adapting to changing departmental expectations. Some officers, particularly those with more experience, continued to produce detailed analytical reports despite time pressures. Others adopted more minimalist approaches that met legal requirements while sacrificing investigative depth. Chun realized that reading these reports chronologically provided insights into broader changes in police work that individual cases could not reveal. The evolution of documentation styles reflected changing social expectations, technological capabilities, and administrative priorities that shaped law enforcement practice. Each report was both an individual, professional effort and a component of institutional adaptation to changing circumstances. The archives preserved not just the facts of individual crimes but the history of police professionalism itself, documented in the careful attention officers paid to recording their work for future reference and review. The reports revealed dedication to duty that persisted despite changing conditions and requirements, reflecting the fundamental commitment to public service that motivated effective police work regardless of external pressures. As Chun prepared to close her second night in the archives, she reflected on the patterns that had emerged from systematic reading of police reports across a decade. The documentation revealed police work as both craft and profession, requiring technical skills, analytical thinking, and communication abilities that developed over time through practice and experience. The best reports combined legal accuracy with investigative insight, creating records that served multiple purposes while maintaining focus on public safety and community welfare. The silence of the archives had once again provided sanctuary for contemplation and learning, allowing her to understand police work as part of larger social and historical processes. Tomorrow night, she would continue reading, moving into the 1980s and the further evolution of police documentation practices. Each night spent among these files deepened her appreciation for the complexity and importance of the work she had chosen, and for the officers who had established the professional standards she now worked to maintain. The third night found Detective Chen drawn to the older sections of the archives, where filing cabinets lined the back wall in patient rows that seemed to stretch deeper into shadow than the room's actual dimensions could accommodate. These cabinets bore the patina of decades, their metal surfaces dulled to a soft gray that absorbed rather than reflected the overhead fluorescent lighting. The labels on these drawers were typed on manual typewriters, the letters slightly uneven and faded to the color of old tea. She approached the oldest cabinet with the reverence due to historical documents, sliding open the top drawer with careful pressure that produced a soft metallic whisper. Inside, manila folders nested against each other like sleeping birds, their tabs marked with dates and case numbers in handwriting that belonged to officers long since retired or deceased. The very air rising from the open drawer carried the scent of old paper and aging metal, a fragrance that spoke of patient preservation and institutional memory. The earliest files dated to the late 1960s, before the departmental consolidation that had created the modern police force. These documents represented the work of smaller municipal departments that had served individual neighborhoods with the intimacy possible only in smaller communities. The reports from this period were written by hand on pre-printed forms, each page filled with the careful script of officers who understood that their handwriting would be read and evaluated by supervisors, attorneys, and judges. Detective Robert Henley's reports from 1968 exemplified the personal nature of police work in that era. His investigation of a reported break-in on Maple Street read like a conversation with neighbors rather than a formal police document. Henley knew the victim's family, recognized the responding patrol officer as his cousin, and included in his report observations about recent changes in the neighborhood that might have influenced the crime. The break-in itself was minor, involving the theft of small household items and loose change. But Henley's investigation revealed connections to broader community concerns. His report noted that several elderly residents had mentioned feeling less secure, since the construction of a new apartment complex had brought unfamiliar faces to the neighborhood. He documented conversations with local business owners who had observed teenagers gathering in areas that had previously been occupied by families with young children. Henley's approach to investigation involved what would now be called community policing, though he would not have recognized the term. His reports consistently included information about neighborhood dynamics, family relationships, and social pressures that provided context for understanding individual crimes. His work demonstrated an understanding that effective police work required knowledge of the community's informal networks and unwritten rules. A vandalism case from the same period illustrated Henley's method. Graffiti had appeared on the walls of the elementary school, including messages that seemed to reference local families and recent community controversies. Rather than simply documenting the damage and interviewing school officials, Henley spent time talking with parents, local business owners, and longtime residents who could help him understand the meanings behind the graffiti. Messages. His investigation revealed that the vandalism was related to tensions surrounding school integration policies that were beginning to affect the community. The graffiti messages, which had initially appeared to be random teenage rebellion, actually reflected deeper community divisions about racial integration and changing demographics. Henley's report included careful documentation of these community tensions without taking sides. In the political controversy, the resolution of the case demonstrated Henley's understanding of community dynamics. Rather than pursuing criminal charges that might have inflamed existing tensions, he arranged for the graffiti's removal and organized a community meeting where different viewpoints could be expressed constructively. His report noted that no additional vandalism occurred after the community meeting, suggesting that the underlying tensions had been addressed rather than simply suppressed. Chun realized that these older files contained a different conception of police work, one that emphasized community knowledge and relationship building over technical investigation and legal procedures. The officers who created these reports understood themselves as community members first and law enforcement professionals second, bringing intimate local knowledge to their investigative work. Detective Mary O'Sullivan's reports from 1969 demonstrated another approach to community-oriented police work. Her investigations of domestic disputes revealed deep understanding of family dynamics and social pressures that influenced household conflicts. O'Sullivan's reports included detailed background information about family histories, employment situations, and social support networks that affected her ability to resolve conflicts and prevent future incidents. O'Sullivan's domestic dispute reports read like social work case files, with careful attention to children's welfare, economic pressures, and extended family relationships that could provide support or create additional stress. Her investigations often involved multiple visits to affected families, with follow-up reports that tracked the effectiveness of interventions and identified additional resources that might help prevent future conflicts. A case from early 1969 illustrated O'Sullivan's comprehensive approach. A domestic dispute call initially appeared to involve simple marital conflict, but O'Sullivan's investigation revealed complex family dynamics involving unemployment, alcohol abuse, and caring for an elderly parent with dementia. Her report documented not just the immediate incident, but the family's history of similar conflicts and the community resources available to address underlying problems. O'Sullivan's intervention involved coordinating with social services, employment counseling, and elder care resources to address the multiple factors contributing to family stress. Her follow-up reports tracked the family's progress over several months, noting gradual improvement in household stability and reduction in police calls. The case demonstrated how thorough investigation and community coordination could address root causes rather than simply responding to symptoms. The filing cabinets contained dozens of similar cases from this period, each revealing officers who understood their work as part of broader community welfare rather than simply law enforcement. These reports showed police work integrated with social services, educational institutions, and community organizations in ways that would be difficult to achieve under modern departmental structures and legal requirements. Detective Frank Kowalski's reports from 1970 demonstrated expertise in what would now be called problem-oriented policing. His investigation of repeated complaints about noise and disturbances at a local tavern revealed complex relationships between business operations, neighborhood demographics, and municipal regulations that affected community life. Kowalski's reports included detailed analysis of how zoning changes and demographic shifts had created conflicts between commercial and residential land uses. Rather than simply responding to individual complaints, Kowalski mapped the pattern of problems over time and identified underlying factors that contributed to ongoing conflicts. His investigation revealed that the tavern's problems began when a nearby factory changed its shift schedule, bringing more workers into the neighborhood during evening hours when residents expected quiet. The noise complaints reflected broader tensions about neighborhood change rather than specific problems with tavern management. Kowalski's solution involved working with city planning officials, business owners, and neighborhood residents to develop compromises that addressed legitimate concerns while preserving business viability. His reports documented months of community meetings and negotiations that resulted in modified business hours, improved soundproofing, and better coordination between commercial and residential activities. The resolution of the tavern case demonstrated how individual police problems could reflect broader community development, issues that required collaborative solutions involving multiple municipal departments and community stakeholders. Kowalski's reports showed understanding that effective police work sometimes required addressing land use planning, economic development, and social integration rather than simply enforcing existing laws. As Chin read through these older files, she noticed recurring themes that distinguished earlier police work from modern practice. Officers routinely included information about economic conditions, family relationships, and community dynamics that provided context for understanding individual crimes. Their investigations often involved multiple contacts with affected families and ongoing monitoring of problem situations. Their solutions frequently emphasized community coordination and resource development, rather than criminal prosecution. These older reports also revealed different relationships between police officers and the communities they served. Officers like Henley, O'Sullivan, and Kowalski were clearly known personally by many residents, and their investigations benefited from detailed knowledge of local families, businesses, and social networks. Their reports assumed familiarity with community history and ongoing relationships that extended beyond individual police encounters. Detective Joseph Martinez's reports from 1970 illustrated the advantages and limitations of this community-oriented approach. His investigation of juvenile complaints in the downtown area revealed detailed knowledge of individual families, school problems, and peer group dynamics that helped him understand and address recurring problems with teenage behavior. Martinez knew the parents of most juveniles he encountered, understood their family situations, and could predict which interventions were likely to be effective. However, Martinez's reports also revealed the challenges of policing in small communities, where personal relationships could complicate professional judgment. His investigation of shoplifting complaints involving teenagers from prominent families required careful navigation of community, politics, and social expectations that sometimes conflicted with legal requirements. His reports documented the pressure to handle cases informally when formal Prosecution might damage family, reputations, or community relationships. Resolution of these juvenile cases often involved informal agreements between police, families, and business owners that emphasized restitution and community service rather than criminal charges. Martinez's reports suggested that these informal solutions were often more effective than formal prosecution in preventing repeat offenses. But they also created potential for inconsistent treatment based on family status and community connections. The late 1960s and early 1970s represented a transitional period in police work, as smaller municipal departments were consolidated into larger regional forces that could provide more specialized services and professional training. The files from this period documented both the advantages of intimate community knowledge and the limitations of informal, relationship-based law enforcement. Chun found herself drawn to the physical characteristics of these older files as much as their content. The handwritten reports required careful deciphering, as officers' handwriting varied widely in legibility and style. Some wrote in careful cursive that remained perfectly readable decades later, while others produced script that required patient interpretation. The pre-printed forms used during this period provided more space for narrative description than modern standardized reports, allowing officers to include contextual information that would be difficult to accommodate in contemporary formats. The paper itself told stories of institutional change and budget constraints. Early reports were written on heavy bond paper that had yellowed slightly but remained sturdy and legible. Later reports from the early 1970s used thinner paper that showed signs of acid deterioration, with edges becoming brittle and text beginning to fade. The transition reflected municipal budget pressures that affected all aspects of government operations, including the quality of basic office supplies. Photographs attached to these older files provided glimpses into a different era of police work and community life. Black and white crime scene photos showed neighborhoods with different architectural styles, street layouts, and urban landscapes than the modern city. The images captured details of daily life that were incidental to criminal investigations but valuable for understanding the social context in which crimes occurred. A burglary case from 1971 included photographs that inadvertently documented a neighborhood in transition. The crime scene photos showed a residential street lined with older homes, some well-maintained and others showing signs of deferred maintenance that suggested economic pressure on long-time residents. Background details in the photographs revealed the presence of new apartment buildings that were beginning to change neighborhood demographics and social dynamics. Detective William Chun, no relation to Detective Sarah Chun, investigated this burglary with the thoroughness characteristic of the period. His report included interviews with a dozen neighbors, detailed documentation of the victim's routine and social connections, and analysis of recent changes in neighborhood crime patterns. His investigation revealed that the burglary was part of a series targeting elderly residents who lived alone and might be vulnerable to property crimes. Chun's solution involved organizing a neighborhood watch program that connected elderly residents with younger families who could provide informal security through increased social contact and mutual assistance. His report documented the establishment of this program and tracked its effectiveness over several months, noting significant reduction in property crimes and improved community cohesion. Files from this transitional period revealed police officers adapting to changing community conditions while maintaining personal relationships and local knowledge that characterized earlier eras. Their reports documented efforts to preserve community-oriented approaches within increasingly professionalized and bureaucratized police departments. Detective Angela Rodriguez's reports from 1972 demonstrated innovative approaches to maintaining community connections within modern police procedures. Her investigations of family disputes and juvenile problems combine traditional relationship-based interventions with new professional standards for documentation and follow-up. Rodriguez developed systems for tracking family problems over time and coordinating with social services while maintaining the personal touch that made community policing effective. Rodriguez's approach proved particularly valuable for addressing recurring problems that required long-term intervention rather than one-time responses. Her files contained detailed case histories that tracked families through multiple police contacts, documenting patterns of problems and the effectiveness of different intervention strategies. This longitudinal approach allowed her to identify early warning signs and provide preventive assistance before problems escalated to serious crimes. A juvenile case from 1972 illustrated Rodriguez's method. A teenager's repeated conflicts with teachers and parents initially appeared to be typical adolescent rebellion, but Rodriguez's investigation revealed underlying problems with undiagnosed learning disabilities and family stress related to economic difficulties. Her intervention involved coordinating with school counselors, social services, and community organizations to address multiple factors contributing to the teenager's behavioral problems. Rodriguez's follow-up, REPORTS, tracked the teenager's progress over 2 years, documenting gradual improvement in school performance, family relationships, and community involvement. The case demonstrated how comprehensive intervention and long-term monitoring could address root causes of juvenile problems, rather than simply responding to individual incidents. Asterisk. The archives contained hundreds of similar cases from this period, each revealing officers who understood their work as part of comprehensive community welfare rather than narrow law enforcement. These reports showed police work integrated with education, social services, healthcare, and community development in ways that created safety through community strengthening rather than simply crime control. As Chun prepared to close her third night in the archives, she reflected on the layers of institutional memory preserved in these older files. Each report represented not just individual professional effort, but collective knowledge about effective community policing that had developed over decades of practice. The files revealed police work as both craft and art, requiring technical skills, analytical thinking, and interpersonal abilities that could only be developed through experience and community engagement. The dust that had settled on these older files seemed to her now like a protective layer, preserving knowledge and wisdom that remained relevant despite changes in technology, procedures, and social conditions. The fundamental challenges of community safety and welfare remained constant, even as the methods for addressing them evolved with changing times and circumstances. Tomorrow night, she would continue her exploration of the archives, moving forward in time to examine how police work adapted to the social and technological changes of the later 20th century. But tonight, she carried with her a deeper appreciation for the community knowledge and relationship-building skills that had characterized the best police work of earlier generations, and a recognition that these fundamental approaches to public safety remained valuable, despite the evolution of modern law enforcement practices. Detective Chun's fourth night in the archives led her to a different kind of documentation. Altogether, files that concerned not just individual crimes, but the buildings and spaces where those crimes had occurred. These reports, scattered throughout different time periods and filing systems, revealed how certain locations seemed to accumulate criminal activity like sediment, layer upon layer of incidents that transformed ordinary structures into repositories of institutional memory. The courthouse on 5th Street appeared in police reports spanning 5 decades, its neoclassical columns and marble steps serving as backdrop for everything from petty disturbances to major felony proceedings. But it was not the formal legal proceedings that interested Chun tonight. Rather, it was the smaller incidents documented in patrol. reports and incident summaries that revealed how the building functioned as a focal point for community tension and resolution. Officer Patricia Donovan's reports from 1974 captured the courthouse during a period of social upheaval when anti-war demonstrations and civil rights protests regularly filled its front steps. Her documentation of crowd control and public safety incidents revealed the building as a stage for democratic expression, where constitutional rights played out in the physical space between protesters and police officers tasked with maintaining order while protecting free speech. Donovan's reports from this period read like architectural studies, noting how the courthouse's design influenced crowd dynamics and protest activities. The wide steps provided natural amphitheater seating for speakers and audiences, while the building's elevated position gave symbolic weight to demonstrations staged on its grounds. The surrounding streets created natural boundaries for permitted assembly areas, though the interaction between protesters, counter-protesters, and regular courthouse business created complex crowd management challenges. A particular incident from August 1974 illustrated how the building's physical characteristics affected police work. A permitted anti-war demonstration on the courthouse steps coincided with jury selection for a high-profile criminal trial, creating competing demands for access and security. Donovan's report documented how the building's single main entrance created bottlenecks that required careful coordination between demonstration monitors, court security, and regular police patrols. The resolution of this incident required temporary modifications to courthouse access procedures, with police establishing separate entrance routes for different categories of building users. Donovan's report included detailed diagrams showing traffic flow patterns and security checkpoints that allowed both demonstration and court proceedings to occur safely and simultaneously. Her documentation became a template for managing similar situations at other public buildings. Chun found that courthouse-related files from the 1970s and 1980s revealed changing approaches to public security and constitutional rights. Early reports emphasized accommodation and facilitation of lawful assembly, while later documents showed increased concern with security threats and access control. The building itself remained constant, but police procedures evolved to address changing social conditions and threat assessments. Detective James Walsh's reports from the 1980s documented a different aspect of courthouse-related police work: the security challenges created by high-profile criminal trials that attracted media attention and public interest. His files contained detailed security assessments for courthouse operations during major cases, including crowd control procedures, media management protocols, and coordination with federal and state law enforcement agencies. Walsh's security planning documents revealed the courthouse as a complex operational environment where multiple agencies and interests intersected. His reports included architectural analyses that identified potential security vulnerabilities, traffic management plans that addressed increased vehicle and pedestrian activity, and communication protocols that ensured coordination among different law enforcement entities during high-stress situations. A murder trial from 1986 demonstrated the complexity of courthouse security during major criminal proceedings. Walsh's reports documented the need to balance public access to court proceedings with security concerns related to threats against witnesses, victims' families, and court personnel. His security plan included modifications to building access procedures, enhanced screening protocols, and discrete protection measures that maintained courthouse operations while addressing credible security threats. Implementation of Walsh's security measures required careful coordination with court administrators, building maintenance staff, and multiple law enforcement agencies. His reports documented daily briefings, security assessments, and incident responses that ensured safe courthouse operations throughout the trial period. The successful completion of the trial without security incidents validated Walsh's comprehensive planning approach and established protocols for future high-profile cases beyond the courthouse. Chun discovered files documenting police interactions with other significant buildings that had accumulated histories of criminal activity. The old Riverside Hotel on Main Street appeared in reports spanning from the 1960s through its demolition in the 1990s. Its gradual deterioration paralleling the neighborhood's economic decline and social challenges. Early reports from the 1960s described the Riverside as a respectable establishment serving business, travelers, and hosting community events. Police contacts during this period were minimal, typically involving minor disturbances or assistance with medical emergencies. The building's solid construction and professional management created an environment that discouraged criminal activity and supported legitimate business operations. Detective Robert Martinez's reports from the 1970s documented the beginning of the hotel's decline as economic changes affected the downtown business district. His files showed increased police calls for domestic disturbances, minor thefts, and noise complaints as the hotel's clientele shifted from business travelers to longer-term residents with fewer economic resources and more complex social problems. Martinez's documentation revealed how building conditions affected crime patterns and police work. As the hotel's maintenance declined and management became less attentive, the physical environment began to attract activities that would not have occurred when the building was well maintained and professionally operated. His reports noted broken locks, inadequate lighting, and deteriorating common areas that created opportunities for criminal activity. Asterisk. The progression of police calls at the Riverside Hotel illustrated how building deterioration could create self-reinforcing cycles of decline. As crime increased, respectable tenants left, reducing rental income and limiting resources available for maintenance and security. The resulting further deterioration attracted additional criminal activity, creating a downward spiral that ultimately led to the building's abandonment and demolition. Detective Lisa Parks' reports from the 1980s documented the final phase of the Riverside's decline, when the building had become a focus for drug activity and other serious crimes. Her files contained detailed descriptions of the building's physical condition and the challenges it created for police operations. Broken windows, unreliable electrical systems, and structural damage made the building dangerous for officers and residents alike. Parks' reports also documented efforts to address the problems created by the deteriorating hotel through building code enforcement, social services intervention, and community organization. Her files showed coordination with city inspectors, health department officials, and social workers in attempts to improve conditions or relocate vulnerable residents to safer housing. The eventual closure and demolition of the Riverside Hotel represented both failure and opportunity. As documented in police reports from the early 1990s, Detective Michael Johnson's files from this period described the complex process of securing the abandoned building, relocating remaining residents, and coordinating with demolition contractors to ensure public safety during the building's removal. Johnson's reports revealed how building demolition affected neighborhood crime patterns and police work. The removal of the deteriorated hotel eliminated a focus for criminal activity, but it also displaced problems to other locations and created new challenges related to vacant lot maintenance and development planning. His documentation showed both immediate improvements in neighborhood safety and ongoing concerns about proper land use and community development. The old Central Elementary School building provided another case study in how architectural spaces influenced crime patterns and police work over time. built in 1928 and closed in 1985. The building served various functions that brought it to police attention in different ways throughout its operational lifetime and subsequent abandonment. Officer Sandra Chun's reports from the 1970s, again, no relation to Detective Sarah Chun, documented routine police contacts with the active elementary school, primarily involving traffic safety during school hours and occasional vandalism or theft incidents after hours. Her files showed how school buildings required special police attention due to their concentration of children and the security challenges created by large, complex buildings with multiple entrances and extensive grounds. Chun's documentation revealed the seasonal rhythms of school-related police work, with different types of incidents occurring during the academic year versus summer vacation periods. During school sessions, police calls typically involved traffic accidents, child welfare issues, and conflicts between school policies and community expectations. Summer periods brought increased vandalism, trespassing, and minor theft as unsupervised juveniles gained access to school grounds. The school's architectural design influenced both its security, vulnerabilities, and the types of police incidents that occurred there. The building's multiple entrances and extensive playground areas made comprehensive security difficult, while its location in a residential neighborhood created conflicts between school activities and community life. Chun's reports documented ongoing negotiations between school administrators, police, and neighborhood residents about traffic patterns, noise levels, and after-hours access to school facilities. Detective Paul Rivera's reports from the early 1980s documented changing conditions at Central Elementary as enrollment declined and the building's future became uncertain. His files showed increased vandalism and break-ins as community investment in the school decreased and building maintenance was deferred due to budget constraints. The school's gradual deterioration created security challenges, similar to those observed at the Riverside Hotel. Rivera's documentation revealed how institutional uncertainty affected crime patterns and police work. As rumors of school closure circulated, community supervision decreased and opportunistic criminal activity increased. The building's value as a community asset diminished, reducing informal social controls that had previously discouraged criminal activity on school grounds. The closure of Central Elementary in 1985 created new challenges for police work, as documented in Officer Margaret Thompson's reports from that period. The empty school building became a focus for vandalism, trespassing, and other crimes associated with abandoned structures. Thompson's files contain detailed security assessments and recommendations for protecting the closed building while city officials determined its future use. Thompson's reports revealed the complex legal and practical issues associated with abandoned public buildings. The city retained ownership and liability for the structure, while lacking resources for comprehensive security or maintenance. Police were responsible for preventing criminal activity and public safety hazards without clear authority to modify building access or security features. Eventual conversion of the old school building to senior housing in the late 1980s required extensive police coordination, as documented in Detective Frank Kowalski's files from that period. His reports described security planning for the renovation period, when the building was particularly vulnerable to theft and vandalism, and the establishment of police protocols for the new residential facility. Kowalski's documentation showed how building renovation and change of use affected neighborhood crime patterns and police work. The conversion from abandoned school to active senior housing required adjustments in patrol patterns, response procedures, and community relations. His reports tracked the adaptation process and identified lessons learned for future building. Rehabilitation projects at the old city jail building on Court Street provided perhaps the most complex example of how architectural, Spaces accumulated criminal history while serving law enforcement functions. Built in 1952 and expanded in 1967, the jail had been replaced by a modern corrections facility in 1989, leaving the old building to serve various municipal functions while retaining its institutional character and accumulated memories. Sergeant David Liu's reports from the jail's operational period documented the daily challenges of managing a secure facility within an urban environment. His files revealed how the building's design influenced both security operations and community relations, with the jail's prominent location creating ongoing tensions between public safety needs and neighborhood concerns about traffic, noise, and property values. Liu's documentation showed how jail operations affected broader police work in the surrounding area. The concentration of criminal processing, court appearances, and family visits created unique security challenges and opportunities for additional criminal activity. His reports included detailed analyses of crime patterns in the jail's vicinity and recommendations for patrol procedures that addressed both facility security and community safety. Transfer of operations to the new corrections facility in 1989 required extensive planning and coordination, as documented in Lieutenant Sarah Foster's reports from that period. Her files describe the complex process of relocating inmates, transferring equipment and records, and establishing security for the abandoned jail building. The transition revealed both the challenges and opportunities created by major changes in law enforcement infrastructure. Foster's reports documented efforts to repurpose the old jail building for other municipal functions while maintaining appropriate security and community relations. The building's institutional character and secure construction made it suitable for certain government uses, but its history and design also created ongoing challenges for community acceptance and integration. As Chun read through these building-focused files, she began to understand how architectural spaces functioned as repositories of institutional memory and community history. Each building, documented in police reports, carried the accumulated weight of human activities and social processes that had occurred within its walls over decades of use and change. The files revealed how building conditions influenced crime patterns and police work in ways that extended beyond immediate security considerations. The physical environment shaped social interactions, created opportunities or barriers for criminal activity, and influenced community attitudes toward law enforcement and public safety. Chun realized that these building-focused reports provided a different perspective on police work, one that emphasized the spatial and temporal contexts within which crimes occurred and investigations proceeded. Understanding how buildings accumulated history and influenced behavior was essential for effective police work, particularly in community-oriented approaches that emphasized prevention and problem-solving. Rather than simply responding to incidents, the archives had once again provided sanctuary for contemplation and learning, allowing her to understand police work as part of larger urban processes involving architecture, community development, and social change. The buildings documented in these files served as stages for human drama, their walls and spaces shaping the activities they contained while carrying forward the memories of everything that had occurred within their boundaries. Tomorrow night, she would continue her exploration, perhaps focusing on the human networks and family connections that appeared throughout the files, the way individual lives intersected with institutional processes and community development. But tonight, she carried with her a deeper appreciation for the physical environments within which police work occurred, and for the way buildings themselves became part of the ongoing story of community safety and social order. Detective Chung's fifth night among the archives drew her toward files that revealed the intricate web of family relationships and neighborhood connections that formed the invisible infrastructure of community life. These reports, spanning decades and countless individual cases, showed how crimes rarely occurred in isolation, but emerged from the complex network of human relationships that bound people together in both support and conflict. The Moretti family files provided a particularly rich example of how police documentation could trace family dynamics across generations. The first report involving the Morettis dated to 1967, when Officer Raymond Kelly responded to a domestic disturbance call at their home on Pine Street. His handwritten report described what appeared to be a simple marital argument, but his careful documentation included details about family structure and neighborhood context that would prove significant in later incidents. Kelly's initial report noted that the Moretti household included not just the husband and wife, but also an elderly grandmother, 2 teenage children, and a recently immigrated cousin who was staying with the family while establishing residence in the city. This extended family arrangement was common in the neighborhood during that period, as immigrant families often shared housing to reduce costs and provide mutual support during the settlement process. The domestic disturbance itself was minor, involving a disagreement about household expenses that had escalated into shouting, but no physical violence. Kelly's resolution involved careful listening to both parties, gentle mediation that acknowledged financial pressures affecting the family, and informal follow-up to ensure that tensions did not escalate. His report included observations about the family's obvious care for each other despite their current conflict, and recommendations for community resources that might help address underlying stresses. Detective Angela Santos's reports from the early 1970s documented the Moretti family's adaptation to changing neighborhood conditions as urban renewal projects displaced longtime residents and altered community social networks. Her files showed how external pressures affected family stability as the Morettis struggled to maintain their home and community connections while neighborhood demographics shifted around them. Santos's investigation of a break-in at the Moretti home in 1973 revealed both the family's vulnerability and their resilience in the face of changing conditions. The burglary occurred during daytime hours when most family members were at work or school, suggesting that the perpetrator was familiar with family routines and neighborhood patterns. Santos's investigation identified the burglar as a local teenager whose own family had been displaced by urban renewal, creating economic desperation that led to property crimes against former neighbors. The resolution of this case demonstrated Santos's understanding of how community disruption created conditions for crime, while also revealing opportunities for healing and mutual support. Rather than simply pursuing prosecution, she arranged for restitution and community service that allowed the young perpetrator to rebuild relationships with affected families while addressing the underlying economic pressures that had motivated the crime. Santos's reports documented ongoing contact with the Moretti family over several years, tracking their adaptation to neighborhood change and their role in maintaining community connections as longtime residents who could bridge different cultural groups and generations. Her files showed how families like the Morettis served as informal community anchors, providing stability and continuity during periods of rapid social change. The next generation of Moretti police contacts appeared in Detective Michael Rivera's reports from the 1980s, when the family's children, now adults with families of their own, became involved in different types of police matters. Rivera's files showed how family patterns could persist across generations while also adapting to new social and economic conditions. Rivera's documentation of a noise complaint at a Moretti family gathering in 1984 revealed how large extended families navigated urban living conditions that were not designed to accommodate traditional family structures. The complaint involved a birthday celebration that spilled from the family's small apartment onto the adjacent courtyard, creating conflict with neighbors who were not part of the family's social network. Rivera's resolution of this incident required understanding both the family's cultural traditions and the legitimate concerns of neighbors who were affected by noise and activity levels. His report documented negotiations that resulted in modified celebration practices that honored family traditions while respecting community standards for shared living spaces. The Moretti files also illustrated how police officers developed long-term relationships with families over time, creating institutional memory that enhanced police effectiveness while also creating potential complications when personal and professional relationships overlapped. Rivera's reports showed familiarity with family members that enabled more effective interventions, but also required careful attention to maintaining professional boundaries and community trust. Detective Lisa Parks' reports from the 1990s documented the third generation of Moretti police contacts, as the family's grandchildren encountered different challenges related to economic opportunities, educational access, and social integration in a rapidly changing urban environment. Parks' files showed how historical family strengths could provide resources for addressing contemporary challenges, while family patterns could also create vulnerabilities that required police attention. Parks' investigation of vandalism involving one of the Moretti grandchildren revealed complex family dynamics around educational expectations, economic pressures, and cultural identity that influenced teenage behavior and family relationships. Her report documented how the family's strong internal bonds could sometimes create pressure and isolation that contributed to behavioral problems, while also providing resources for intervention and support. Resolution of this case involved family counseling, educational advocacy, and community service that drew upon family strengths while addressing underlying tensions and pressures. Parks' documentation showed how effective police work with families required understanding both historical patterns and contemporary challenges, using family resources while also connecting families with external supports when needed. The Taylor family files provided another example of how police documentation could trace family development over time, but with different patterns and outcomes than those observed in the Moretti family. The first Taylor police contact appeared in Detective William Hayes's reports from 1975, involving a custody dispute that revealed complex family relationships and economic pressures affecting child welfare. Hayes's initial report documented a family struggling with unemployment, housing instability, and social isolation that created stress and conflict around childcare responsibilities. His investigation revealed that the custody dispute reflected broader family difficulties rather than simple parental conflict, with economic pressures limiting family options and creating conditions for ongoing tension. Hayes's intervention involved coordination with social services, employment counseling, and community organizations to address multiple factors affecting family stability. His reports tracked the family's progress over several months, documenting gradual improvement in employment situation and housing stability that reduced family stress and improved child care arrangements. However, Detective Patricia Wells's reports from the early 1980s showed how family progress could be fragile and subject to external pressures that created new challenges and conflicts. Her files documented the Taylor family's encounter with serious illness that created medical expenses and caregiving responsibilities that strained family resources and relationships. Wells's documentation of domestic violence incidents involving the Taylor family revealed how external stresses could overwhelm family coping mechanisms and create dangerous situations that required immediate police intervention, and long-term support services. Her reports showed the complexity of family violence, involving multiple factors including economic pressure, social isolation, substance abuse, and mental health issues that required coordinated intervention from multiple agencies. The long-term resolution of Taylor family problems required years of coordinated intervention involving police, social services, healthcare, and community organizations. Wells's reports tracked this process over time, documenting both setbacks and progress as the family worked to address underlying issues while maintaining safety and stability for children and vulnerable family members. Asterisk. Detective James Rodriguez's reports from the late 1980s documented the Taylor family's eventual stabilization and their role in helping other families facing similar challenges. His files showed how families that had successfully addressed serious problems could become resources for community support and intervention, using their experience to help others navigate complex social service systems and family challenges. The contrast between the Moretti and Taylor family patterns illustrated how similar external pressures could affect families differently depending on their internal resources, social connections, and cultural backgrounds. Both families faced economic challenges and neighborhood change, but their different responses and outcomes revealed the complexity of family dynamics and the importance of individualized police and social service interventions. The Washington Family Files provided a third pattern of family-police interaction, documented primarily in Detective Sandra Kim's reports from the 1980s and 1990s. The Washington families' police contacts were less frequent, but more serious than those of the Moretti or Taylor families, involving criminal activity that required careful investigation and intervention to protect both family members and community safety. Kim's initial report involving the Washington family documented a burglary investigation that revealed complex family dynamics around substance abuse, criminal activity, and attempts by some family members to maintain legitimate lifestyles while others engaged in illegal behavior. Her investigation required careful attention to protecting law-abiding family members while pursuing appropriate charges against those involved in criminal activity. Kim's documentation showed how family loyalty and protection could complicate police investigations while also providing opportunities for intervention and rehabilitation. Her reports tracked efforts to connect family members with treatment and support services while maintaining necessary legal consequences for criminal behavior. The resolution of Washington family cases required balancing multiple considerations, including public safety, family welfare, individual accountability, and community interests. Kim's reports documented collaborative efforts among police, prosecutors, social services, and community organizations to develop intervention strategies that addressed both immediate safety concerns and underlying factors contributing to family problems. The generational patterns observed in these family files revealed how police work was embedded in long-term community relationships and social processes that extended far beyond individual criminal incidents. The officers who documented these family interactions understood their work as part of ongoing community development and family support rather than simply law enforcement and crime control. Detective Robert Chun's reports from the 1990s, still no relation to Detective Sarah Chun, documented efforts to develop more systematic approaches to family-centered police work, using information from long-term family files to identify patterns and develop preventive interventions. His files showed how historical documentation could inform contemporary police practice while also revealing the limitations of traditional incident-based approaches to community safety. Chun's innovation was developing family-focused case management approaches that treated repeated police contacts as opportunities for comprehensive intervention rather than isolated incidents, requiring separate responses. His reports documented efforts to coordinate police work with social services education, healthcare, and community organizations to address underlying factors that contributed to recurring family problems. The success of Chun's family-centered approach was documented in reduced repeat calls, improved family stability, and better community relationships that enhanced overall police effectiveness. His reports showed how understanding family dynamics and community connections could improve both crime prevention and police legitimacy while reducing the burden on emergency response systems. The neighborhood-level analysis of family files revealed broader patterns of community, development, and social change that affected police work and public safety. Areas with strong extended family networks and stable housing showed different crime patterns than neighborhoods with high residential mobility and weak social connections. Understanding these patterns helped police develop more effective deployment strategies and community partnerships. Detective Maria Santos's reports from the late 1990s documented efforts to map family and social networks as tools for community policing and crime prevention. Her files showed how information about family relationships, neighborhood connections, and community resources could enhance police effectiveness, while also identifying opportunities for community development and social support. Santos's community mapping approach revealed how informal social networks provided both resources for crime prevention and pathways for criminal activity. Understanding these networks enabled more targeted interventions that could disrupt criminal patterns while strengthening community capacity for self-regulation and mutual support. The family files also documented how police officers developed expertise in family dynamics and community relationships over time, creating institutional knowledge that enhanced department effectiveness, while also creating emotional and professional challenges for individual officers. Long-term involvement with families created personal relationships that could complicate professional judgment, while also providing insights that improved police effectiveness. As Chun prepared to close her fifth night in the archives, she reflected on the complex human networks revealed in these family-focused files. Each family story illuminated different aspects of community life and social change, showing how individual families adapted to external pressures while maintaining internal relationships and cultural traditions. The files revealed police work as fundamentally relational, involving ongoing interactions with families and communities that extended far beyond individual criminal incidents. The most effective officers understood their work as part of larger social processes involving family development, community change, and social support systems that influenced both crime patterns and police effectiveness. The archives had once again provided sanctuary for understanding the deeper patterns and connections that shaped police work and community life. The family stories preserved in these files reveal both the fragility and resilience of human relationships, and the important role that police work played in supporting family stability and community welfare. Tomorrow night, she would continue her exploration, perhaps focusing on the night shift operations and the particular challenges and opportunities that characterized police work during the quiet hours when communities revealed different aspects of their character and needs. But tonight, she carried with her a deeper appreciation for the family relationships and community connections that formed the foundation of effective police work and public safety. Detective Chun's sixth night in the archives coincided with her growing curiosity about the documentation of police work during the hours when she now found herself most alert and contemplative. The files relating to night shift operations occupied their own section of the archives, organized by the officers who had worked these quiet hours when the city transformed into something different from its daytime self. The night shift reports began appearing in the department's files during the mid-1970s, when increased urban density and changing social patterns made round-the-clock police coverage necessary. These early night shift files, written by officers like Sergeant Thomas O'Brien, revealed a different pace and character of police work than the busy activity. Documented in daytime reports, O'Brien's reports from 1976 captured the particular atmosphere of night patrol, when empty streets and darkened buildings created a landscape that amplified both sound and significance. His documentation of routine patrol activities read like meditation on urban solitude, noting the way streetlights created pools of visibility separated by areas of shadow, how the absence of traffic allowed officers to hear activities that would be masked during busy daytime hours. Typical night shift report from O'Brien described patrol observations with careful attention to the subtle signs that indicated normal community activity versus potential problems. He noted which houses showed lights at unusual hours, which businesses maintained security lighting, which streets carried pedestrian or vehicle traffic that seemed inconsistent with typical neighborhood patterns. His reports created a baseline understanding of community rhythms that enabled early detection of anomalies that might indicate criminal activity or public safety concerns. O'Brien's approach to night patrol emphasized the importance of familiarity with community patterns and relationships that were only visible during quiet hours. His reports documented conversations with night shift workers, security guards, and residents who were awake during hours when most community members were sleeping. These interactions created a network of informal information sources that enhanced police awareness and community connections. The night shift files revealed how crimes that occurred during late hours often differed from daytime incidents in both character and investigation requirements. Detective Mary Foster's reports from the early 1980s documented how night shift investigations required different approaches to evidence collection, witness interviews, and case development than crimes that occurred when community resources and support services were readily available. Foster's investigation of a series of late-night burglaries illustrated the unique challenges and opportunities of night shift detective work. The crimes occurred between 2 and 4 a.m. in residential neighborhoods, where witnesses were scarce and physical evidence was often limited. However, the quiet conditions also allowed for more careful crime scene examination and the ability to detect subtle signs that might be overlooked during busier periods. Foster's breakthrough in the burglary case came through her systematic documentation of environmental conditions during the time periods when crimes occurred. Her reports noted weather patterns, lighting conditions, and community activity levels that revealed how the perpetrator selected targets and planned entry and escape routes. This environmental analysis enabled her to predict likely future targets and coordinate patrol coverage that led to the suspect's apprehension. The resolution of Foster's burglary case demonstrated how night shift police work required patience and systematic observation, rather than rapid response and immediate action. Her reports documented weeks of careful pattern analysis and environmental monitoring that culminated in successful prevention of additional crimes and arrest of the responsible individual. Officer David Liu's reports from the mid-1980s revealed another aspect of night shift work: the domestic and family crises that often emerge during late hours when normal support systems were unavailable and personal stress levels peaked. Liu's documentation of domestic disturbance calls showed how family conflicts that simmered during daytime hours often escalated into crises during late evening and early morning periods. Liu's approach to night shift domestic calls emphasized de-escalation and resource connection rather than immediate law enforcement action. His reports documented how the quiet atmosphere of night hours could actually facilitate more effective intervention, as reduced external distractions allowed officers to focus more completely on family dynamics and individual needs. A domestic violence case from 1987 illustrated Liu's methodology for night shift family crisis intervention. The initial call came at 2:30 a.m. and involved a family argument that had escalated to the point where neighbors were concerned about potential violence. Lou's response required careful assessment of immediate safety issues, while also addressing underlying family stresses that had contributed to the crisis. Liu's report documented a comprehensive intervention that included immediate safety planning, connection with emergency social services, and follow-up coordination with daytime support resources. His night shift response created a foundation for ongoing assistance that prevented escalation of family violence while addressing underlying issues that had contributed to the crisis. The success of Lou's intervention was documented in follow-up reports that tracked the family's progress over several months. His initial night shift response had created connections with social services, counseling resources, and community supports that enabled long-term family stabilization and prevented recurring crisis calls. Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez's reports from the late 1980s documented efforts to develop more systematic approaches to night shift operations that could capitalize on the unique opportunities and address the specific challenges of police work during quiet hours. Her files showed how night shift coverage could be optimized to enhance overall department effectiveness while also providing better service to community members who needed police assistance during late hours. Rodriguez's innovation was developing specialized night shift procedures that emphasized community knowledge, pattern recognition, and preventive intervention, rather than simply maintaining coverage for emergency response. Her reports documented training programs that helped night shift officers develop skills in environmental observation, community relationship building, and proactive problem identification. The implementation of Rodriguez's specialized night shift approach was documented in improved crime prevention outcomes, better community relationships, and higher job satisfaction among officers who worked night hours. Her reports showed how understanding the unique characteristics of night shift work could enhance both police effectiveness and officer professional development. Detective Patricia Wells's reports from the 1990s revealed how night shift police work had evolved to address changing urban conditions and crime patterns that reflected broader social and economic changes. Her files documented how night shift officers encountered different types of crimes and community issues than those that had characterized earlier periods. Wells's documentation of late-night commercial district patrol showed how changing business patterns and entertainment activities had created new opportunities for both legitimate community life and criminal activity during late hours. Her reports noted how restaurants, bars, and entertainment venues created concentrations of activity that required different patrol strategies and community relationship approaches. Wells's investigation of problems in the late-night entertainment district demonstrated how night shift police work required understanding of business operations, crowd dynamics, and alcohol-related behavioral patterns that affected public safety and community relations. Her reports documented collaboration with business owners, entertainment venue managers, and community organizations to develop strategies that supported legitimate businesses while addressing problems associated with late-night activity. Resolution of entertainment district issues required ongoing coordination among multiple stakeholders and continuous adaptation to changing business conditions and community concerns. Wells's reports tracked this collaborative process over several years, documenting both successes and ongoing challenges in balancing economic development with public safety and community welfare. Sergeant Michael Johnson's reports from the late 1990 South documented the introduction of new technologies and communication systems that enhanced night shift police effectiveness while also changing the character and requirements of police work during quiet hours. His files showed how computer systems, improved radio communications, and mobile data terminals affected night shift operations and officer capabilities. Johnson's documentation revealed both advantages and challenges associated with technological improvements in night shift police work. Enhanced communication and information access improved officer safety and investigative capabilities, But technology also created new requirements for training, maintenance, and coordination that affected night shift operations. The integration of new technologies into night shift work required careful attention to maintaining the community, knowledge and relationship building approaches that had characterized effective night shift policing while also capitalizing on improved technical capabilities. Johnson's reports documented this adaptation process and identified best practices for combining traditional community policing skills with enhanced technological resources. The night shift files also revealed the particular challenges and rewards of police work during hours when community support services were limited, and officers often worked with greater independence and responsibility than their daytime counterparts. Officer Jennifer Kim's reports from the late 1990s documented how night shift work attracted officers who preferred the autonomy and community connection opportunities that characterized police work during quiet hours. Kim's documentation of night shift patrol activities showed how officers developed deep familiarity with community patterns and individual residents that enhanced both crime prevention and community relations. Her reports noted how the reduced pace of night shift work allowed for more thorough investigation of individual cases and more comprehensive community interaction than was possible during busier daytime periods. Kim's approach to night shift community policing emphasized building relationships with residents, business owners, and community members who were active during late hours. Her reports documented how these relationships created information networks and mutual support systems that enhanced public safety, while also strengthening community connections and police legitimacy. The effectiveness of Kim's community-oriented night shift approach was documented in reduced crime rates, improved community satisfaction with police services, and better coordination between police and community resources. Her reports showed how night shift police work could serve as a foundation for broader community policing efforts that enhanced overall department effectiveness. Detective Robert Santos's reports from the early 2000s documented how night shift detective work had evolved to address new types of crimes and investigation challenges that reflected changing technology and social patterns. His files showed how internet-related crimes, identity theft, and other technology-enabled criminal activities often required investigation during hours when suspects were most active and evidence was most accessible. Santos's innovation was developing night shift investigation protocols that could address technology-related crimes while maintaining the community relationship approaches that characterized effective night shift police work. His reports documented how traditional detective skills could be adapted to address new types of crimes while preserving the community knowledge and relationship building capabilities that enhanced overall police effectiveness. The success of Santos's technology-focused night shift investigations was documented in successful prosecution of complex cases and development of department expertise in emerging crime areas. His reports showed how night shift work could provide opportunities for specialized skill development and innovative police practices that enhanced overall department capabilities. The wall clock in the archives showed the progression of time through another quiet night as Chun read through decades of night shift documentation. The reports revealed night shift police work as requiring different skills and approaches than daytime operations, while also providing unique opportunities for community connection and crime prevention that enhanced overall police effectiveness. The files documented how night shift officers developed specialized knowledge of community patterns and relationships that were only visible during quiet hours. This knowledge created opportunities for proactive intervention and community support that prevented crimes and enhanced public safety, while also building community trust and police legitimacy. The night shift reports also revealed how police work during quiet hours required greater independence and decision-making responsibility than daytime operations, creating opportunities for professional development and innovative police practices. while also requiring careful attention to officer support and supervision. As Chun prepared to close her 6th night in the archives, she reflected on the particular character of police work during the hours when she now found herself most alert and contemplative. The night shift files revealed policing as both solitary and community-oriented, requiring individual judgment and initiative while also depending on relationships and collaboration that enhanced both officer effectiveness and community safety. The archives had provided another night of sanctuary for understanding the complexity and importance of police work across all hours of community life. The night shift documentation revealed how effective policing required adaptation to different temporal rhythms and social patterns while maintaining consistent commitment to public safety and community welfare. Tomorrow night, she would continue her exploration of the archives, perhaps focusing on the photographic evidence and visual documentation that accompanied written reports, revealing how images captured aspects of police work and community life that words could not fully convey. But tonight, she carried with her a deeper appreciation for the quiet vigilance and community connection that characterized police work during the WAP hours when cities revealed their most authentic character and needs. Detective Chun's 7th night among the archives drew her to a different kind of evidence altogether. The photographs that accompanied written reports, black and white images that had yellowed at the edges and color prints that had faded to muted pastels over the decades. These visual documents occupied special storage boxes designed to protect them from light and humidity, creating their own quiet archive within the larger collection of police records. The earliest photographs dated to the late 1960s, when cameras were standard equipment for serious crime scenes, but film was expensive, enough that each shot required careful consideration. Detective William Morrison's crime scene photographs from 1969 demonstrated the methodical approach necessary when every image had to justify its cost and purpose. His visual documentation of a burglary scene included carefully composed shots that captured both overview and detail, creating a comprehensive visual record with minimal film usage. Morrison's photographic technique revealed an understanding that images needed to tell complete stories without extensive written explanation. His crime scene photos from the burglary case included establishing shots that showed the building's relationship to surrounding structures, medium shots that documented points of entry and areas of disturbance, and close-up images that preserved details of physical evidence and damage patterns. The black and white images from this period carried a particular gravity that made even minor crimes appear historically significant. The absence of color focused attention on composition, contrast, and detail in ways that enhanced the documentary value of photographs, while also creating aesthetic qualities that transformed police work into inadvertent art. Detective Patricia Wells's photographs from the mid-1970s showed how crime scene documentation had evolved to incorporate insights from forensic science and evidence analysis. Her images demonstrated understanding of how photographs could preserve information that might not be apparent to investigating officers at the time of initial documentation, but could prove crucial during later analysis or court proceedings. Wells's innovation was developing systematic photographic protocols that ensured comprehensive documentation while also creating visual narratives that could communicate effectively with prosecutors, judges, and juries who had not been present at crime scenes. Her photographs included scale references, lighting considerations, and perspective choices that enhanced both scientific accuracy and communicative effectiveness. Robbery Investigation from 1976 illustrated Wells's sophisticated approach to crime scene photography. Her visual documentation included not just evidence and damage, but environmental factors like lighting conditions, visibility from different vantage points, and spatial relationships that helped explain how the crime occurred and what witnesses might have observed. Wells's photographs also revealed her attention to the human impact of crimes, including images that showed property damage in the context of family homes and personal possessions. Her visual documentation balanced the clinical requirements of evidence preservation with recognition that crimes affected real people in tangible ways that deserved respectful attention. The transition to color photography during the late 1970s created new opportunities and challenges for police documentation. Detective James Rodriguez's color crime scene photographs from 1979 showed how improved technology could enhance evidence preservation while also requiring new skills in lighting, exposure, and color balance that affected the quality and usefulness of visual documentation. Rodriguez's color photographs revealed details that had been difficult to capture in black and white images, particularly evidence involving blood, stains, and other materials where color provided crucial information for forensic analysis. However, early color photography also required more complex processing and storage procedures that affected department budgets and evidence handling protocols. The color images from this period also captured incidental details of community life that provided historical context for understanding how neighborhoods and families lived during different eras. Rodriguez's crime scene photographs inadvertently documented interior design, clothing styles, and household technologies that revealed economic conditions and cultural patterns affecting the communities where crimes occurred. Lieutenant Sarah Kim's photographs from the 1980s demonstrated how police photography had evolved to serve multiple purposes beyond basic evidence documentation. Her images were used for training materials, court presentations, and community education programs that enhanced both police effectiveness and public understanding of law enforcement challenges. Kim's innovation was developing photographic techniques that could serve investigative, legal, and educational purposes simultaneously. Her crime scene images included technical documentation required for evidence analysis, visual narratives appropriate for court presentation, and contextual information useful for training officers and educating community members about crime prevention. A domestic violence case from 1985 illustrated Kim's comprehensive approach to police photography. Her visual documentation included evidence of physical violence, environmental factors that influenced family dynamics, and safety considerations that affected both immediate intervention and long-term case development. Her photographs provided foundation for successful prosecution while also supporting social service interventions that addressed underlying family problems. Kim's photographs also demonstrated sensitivity to privacy and dignity concerns that affected police documentation of personal and family situations. Her images preserved necessary evidence while also protecting individual privacy and maintaining respect for victims and families who were experiencing traumatic situations. Detective Michael Santos's photographs from the 1990s showed how digital technology was beginning to influence police photography. Though traditional film remained standard for evidence documentation due to legal requirements for authenticity and chain of custody procedures, Santos's hybrid approach used both film and early digital systems to maximize documentation capabilities while maintaining legal admissibility. Santos's innovation was developing protocols for using digital photography as a supplement to traditional film documentation, creating more comprehensive visual records while maintaining the authenticity requirements necessary for court proceedings. His approach enabled real-time image review and immediate duplication that enhanced investigation capabilities while preserving traditional evidence standards. The integration of digital photography into police work required new training and equipment maintenance procedures that affected department operations and budgets. Santos's documentation of this transition process provided guidance for other departments, adapting to technological changes while maintaining professional standards and legal requirements. Officer Jennifer Liu's photographs from the late 1990s revealed how community policing initiatives had influenced police photography, with images being used to document positive community interactions and crime prevention activities as well as traditional criminal investigations. Liu's visual documentation showed police work as part of broader community development and social support rather than simply law enforcement and crime control. Liu's community-oriented photographs captured police officers engaged in school programs, neighborhood meetings, and community events that demonstrated law enforcement's role in supporting community welfare and public safety through prevention and relationship building. These images provided documentation for program evaluation and community reporting while also enhancing public understanding of comprehensive police work. The effectiveness of Liu's community-oriented photography was documented in improved community relations, better public support for police programs, and enhanced officer morale related to recognition of positive police work. Her visual documentation showed how photography could support comprehensive police work, while also building community trust and police legitimacy. Detective Robert Park's photographs from the early 2000s demonstrated how improved technology had enhanced both the quality and quantity of police photography while also creating new challenges related to image storage, processing, and analysis. Park's comprehensive visual documentation included traditional crime scene images, as well as surveillance footage, digital evidence, and computer-enhanced analysis that reflected evolving investigation techniques. Park's innovation was developing integrated approaches to visual documentation that combined traditional photography with digital analysis and computer enhancement to create more comprehensive and useful visual evidence. His techniques enabled detection of details that might not be apparent through traditional photography alone while maintaining admissibility standards required for court proceedings. The success of Park's integrated visual documentation approach was demonstrated in successful prosecution of complex cases and improved efficiency in evidence analysis and case development. His methods provided foundation for department-wide adoption of enhanced visual documentation techniques that improved overall investigative capabilities. As Chun examined these photographic collections, she began to understand how visual documentation had evolved from simple evidence preservation to comprehensive communication tools that served multiple aspects of police work and community relations. The photographs revealed not just individual crimes, but broader patterns of community life, social change, and institutional development that provided context for understanding law enforcement challenges and opportunities. The crime scene photographs also demonstrated how police work required technical skills and aesthetic judgment that enabled effective visual communication with diverse audiences, including fellow officers, prosecutors, judges, juries, and community members. The most effective police photographers understood their images as both scientific documentation and narrative communication that could influence understanding and decision-making in crucial ways. Detective Carol Rodriguez's photographs from the mid-2000s showed how photography had become integrated with other forms of evidence documentation, including video recording, computer analysis, and forensic science techniques that created comprehensive visual records capable of supporting complex investigations and court proceedings. Rodriguez's comprehensive approach to visual documentation included coordination with forensic specialists, prosecution teams, and community organizations to ensure that photographic evidence served all necessary purposes while maintaining quality and authenticity standards. Her methods demonstrated how police photography had become a specialized professional skill, requiring both technical expertise and understanding of legal and community requirements. The development of Rodriguez's integrated photography protocols was documented in improved case clearance rates, better prosecution outcomes, and enhanced community confidence in police investigations. Her approach provided foundation for training programs that prepared officers to use visual documentation effectively in contemporary law enforcement environments. The photographic archives also contained images that captured the evolution of police equipment, procedures, and community relationships over several decades. These images provided visual history of technological change, procedural development, and social transformation that influenced police work and community life. Officer David Martinez's photographs from recent years demonstrated how modern digital photography had created opportunities for comprehensive visual documentation that could support real-time investigation, immediate analysis, and rapid communication among multiple agencies and organizations involved in complex cases. Martinez's innovation was developing mobile photography protocols that enabled field officers to capture, enhance, and transmit visual evidence immediately to support ongoing investigations and coordinate multi-agency responses. His techniques enhanced both investigation efficiency and officer safety while maintaining evidence quality and legal admissibility. The success of Martinez's mobile photography approach was documented in reduced investigation time, improved interagency coordination, and better resource allocation that enhanced overall police effectiveness while reducing costs and improving community service delivery. As Chun prepared to close her 7th night in the archives, she reflected on how the photographic collections revealed police work as both technical profession and artistic endeavor, requiring skill in visual composition and narrative construction as well as legal knowledge and investigative expertise. The images preserved in these archives captured not just evidence of individual crimes, but visual history of community, development, and social change that provided context for understanding contemporary law enforcement challenges. The photographs also demonstrated how police work involved constant adaptation to technological change, while maintaining fundamental commitments to accuracy, integrity, and service that characterized effective law enforcement regardless of available tools and techniques. Each image represented professional judgment and technical skill applied to serving community needs and supporting public safety. The visual archives had provided another dimension for understanding the complexity and importance of police work, revealing how officers used photography not just for evidence preservation, but for communication, education, and community building that enhanced overall police effectiveness and community welfare. Tomorrow night, she would continue her exploration of the archives, perhaps focusing on the cold case files and unsolved investigations that represented both the limitations and persistence of police work in addressing community safety challenges. But tonight, she carried with her a deeper appreciation for the visual dimension of police work and the skill required to capture and preserve images that could communicate truth and support justice across time and circumstance. Detective Chun's 8th night in the archives found her drawn to the files that documented how the city itself had evolved as both setting and witness to the crimes recorded in police reports across the decades. These cases revealed neighborhoods as living entities that absorbed and reflected the human activities occurring within their boundaries, creating layers of history that could be read like geological strata in the careful documentation of long-term police work. The downtown revitalization files from the 1980s provided a particularly rich example of how urban change influenced crime patterns and police work over extended periods. Detective William Foster's reports from this era documented not just individual incidents, but the gradual transformation of entire city blocks as economic development initiatives altered the physical and social landscape of the central business district. Foster's. Initial reports from 1982 described downtown as a collection of aging commercial buildings, interspersed with vacant lots and underutilized properties that created opportunities for various forms of criminal activity. His documentation included detailed maps showing which buildings were occupied or vacant, which lots were being used for legitimate purposes or had become informal gathering places, and which streets carried regular foot traffic or remained largely deserted during different hours. The systematic nature of Foster's neighborhood documentation created baseline information that enabled police to track how urban development affected crime patterns over time. His reports showed how the rehabilitation of individual buildings influenced activity patterns on entire blocks, how new businesses changed pedestrian traffic and informal surveillance, and how improved lighting and landscaping affected both legitimate community use and criminal opportunity. A series of vandalism cases from the early 1980s illustrated how Foster used neighborhood knowledge to understand and address recurring problems. His investigation revealed that graffiti and property damage concentrated in areas where vacant buildings and empty lots created spaces outside normal community supervision and control. Rather than simply responding to individual incidents, Foster worked with city planning officials and community organizations to address underlying environmental factors that enabled criminal activity. Foster's comprehensive approach to neighborhood-level crime prevention involved mapping relationships between physical conditions and criminal activity, identifying patterns that enabled predictive patrol deployment and targeted intervention. His reports documented collaboration with municipal departments responsible for building inspection, code enforcement, and urban planning to create coordinated approaches to community safety and development. The success of Foster's neighborhood-focused approach was documented in police reports spanning the mid-1980s, showing gradual reduction in property crimes and vandalism as development initiatives eliminated vacant properties and improved environmental conditions. His work demonstrated how police effectiveness could be enhanced through understanding and influencing the physical environment within which crimes occurred. Detective Lisa Parks' reports from the late 1980s and early 1990s documented the continuation of downtown revitalization and its effects on crime patterns and police work. Her files showed how successful development initiatives created new challenges and opportunities for law enforcement as the downtown area attracted different types of businesses and community activities. Parks' documentation revealed how the introduction of restaurants, entertainment venues, and residential development changed the temporal patterns of downtown activity, creating evening and weekend foot traffic that required different police deployment strategies and community relationship approaches. Her reports noted how increased legitimate activity improved informal surveillance and community self-regulation, while also creating new opportunities for certain types of criminal activity. The entertainment district that emerged during this period required specialized police knowledge about crowd management, alcohol-related behavioral issues, and business residential conflicts that affected community relations and public safety. Parks' reports documented the development of collaborative relationships with business owners, residential associations, and community organizations to address these challenges while supporting continued economic development. Parks' innovation was developing beat patrol strategies that capitalized on increased community activity to enhance police-community relationships while also maintaining effective crime prevention and response capabilities. Her approach demonstrated how neighborhood change could create opportunities for improved police work rather than simply new challenges. requiring reactive responses, the Riverside neighborhood. Files provided another example of how long-term urban change influenced police work and community safety over time. Sergeant David Martinez's reports from the 1970s and 1980s documented this area's transition from stable working-class residential neighborhood to area of concentrated social services and transitional housing that created different types of police calls and community challenges. Martinez's early reports from the mid-1970s described Riverside as a neighborhood of modest, single-family homes and small apartment buildings occupied by families with long-term community connections and stable employment. Police calls during this period were primarily minor domestic disputes, occasional property crimes, and traffic-related issues that could be addressed through community-oriented patrol and informal intervention. However, Martinez's reports from the 1980s documented significant changes in neighborhood demographics and social conditions as economic pressures led to increased residential mobility and the introduction of social service facilities that served clients from throughout the metropolitan area. These changes affected both crime patterns and police community relationships in ways that required adapted approaches to law enforcement and community safety. The transition documented in Martinez's files showed how neighborhood change could create challenges for community-oriented police work while also revealing opportunities for police to support community adaptation and resilience. His reports included detailed analysis of how different types of housing and social services affected neighborhood dynamics and what police strategies proved most effective for maintaining public safety while supporting vulnerable populations. Martinez's approach to policing in a changing neighborhood emphasized building relationships with new residents and service providers while maintaining connections with longtime community members who could provide stability and informal social control. His reports documented the complex negotiations required to balance different community interests and needs while maintaining effective law enforcement and public safety. Detective Susan Kim's reports from the 1990s documented efforts to develop comprehensive approaches to neighborhood-level crime prevention that could address both immediate public safety concerns and underlying social and economic factors that influenced community conditions. Her work in the Riverside area demonstrated how police could serve as catalysts for broader community development efforts while maintaining primary focus on law enforcement responsibilities. Kim's innovation was developing partnerships with social service agencies, community organizations, and municipal departments to create coordinated approaches to neighborhood problems that addressed multiple factors simultaneously. Her reports documented how police work could be enhanced through collaboration with other agencies, while also showing how law enforcement knowledge and relationships could support broader community development initiatives. The success of Kim's collaborative approach was documented in improved neighborhood conditions, reduced crime rates, and better community relations that enhanced both police effectiveness and community welfare. Her work provided foundation for department-wide adoption of partnership approaches that enhanced overall police capability while reducing demands on law enforcement resources. Old industrial district files revealed another pattern of neighborhood change and its effects on police work over time. Detective Robert Santos's reports from the 1980s and 1990s documented the transformation of former manufacturing areas into mixed-use developments that combined residential, commercial, and light industrial activities in ways that created new opportunities and challenges for law enforcement. Santos's documentation showed how the conversion of old factories and warehouses into loft apartments, artist studios, and small businesses created vibrant neighborhoods with active street life and strong informal social controls. However, the same areas also attracted activities that sometimes conflicted with residential use and required careful police attention to balance economic development with community livability. Industrial districts' transformation created unique challenges for police work, as former manufacturing buildings often retained architectural features that could facilitate certain types of criminal activity while also serving legitimate artistic and commercial purposes. Santos's reports documented the need for specialized knowledge about building use patterns, legitimate business activities, and community expectations that differed from traditional residential or commercial areas. Santos's approach to policing in the transformed industrial district emphasized understanding the area's economic and cultural dynamics while maintaining effective crime prevention and public safety services. His reports showed how police work in areas undergoing rapid change required flexibility and creativity to address emerging challenges while supporting positive community development. Detective Maria Rodriguez's reports from the early 2000s documented how the success of downtown and industrial district revitalization had created pressures for development in other neighborhoods that had previously been stable but were now experiencing rapid change. Her files showed how gentrification and urban renewal affected established communities and created new challenges for police work and community relations. Asterisk. Rodriguez's documentation revealed how neighborhood change could create conflicts between long-time residents and newcomers with different expectations about community life, property use, and appropriate police responses to various situations. Her reports showed how police officers could serve mediators in these conflicts while maintaining neutrality and effectiveness in law enforcement responsibilities. The challenges documented in Rodriguez's files included noise complaints, property use disputes, and cultural conflicts that required police intervention but were not primarily criminal matters. Her approach emphasized education, mediation, and resource connection rather than enforcement action when appropriate, while maintaining clear boundaries about legitimate police authority and community safety requirements. Rodriguez's work demonstrated how police effectiveness in changing neighborhoods required understanding of community dynamics, cultural sensitivity, and collaborative problem-solving skills that enabled officers to address complex social issues while maintaining focus on public safety and law enforcement responsibilities. The comprehensive neighborhood files also revealed how physical infrastructure and municipal services affected crime patterns and police work over time. Detective Paul Johnson's reports from recent years documented how improvements in street lighting, sidewalk maintenance, and public transportation influenced both criminal opportunity and community activity patterns in ways that affected police deployment and crime prevention strategies. Johnson's innovation was developing systematic approaches to environmental analysis that could identify infrastructure improvements that would enhance public safety while also supporting community development and economic activity. His reports documented collaboration with municipal departments responsible for public works, transportation, and urban planning to create coordinated approaches to community safety and livability. The success of Johnson's infrastructure-focused approach was documented in reduced crime rates, improved community satisfaction with police services, and better coordination among municipal departments that enhanced overall city services while reducing costs and improving efficiency. As Chun read through these neighborhood-focused files, she began to understand how police work was fundamentally connected to broader urban processes involving economic development, social change, and community adaptation. that occurred over periods much longer than individual criminal investigations. The most effective officers understood their work as part of comprehensive community development rather than simply law enforcement and crime control. The files revealed how neighborhoods themselves served as witnesses to criminal activity, retaining environmental evidence and social memory that could inform police work long after individual incidents had been resolved or forgotten. Understanding neighborhood history and development patterns enhanced police effectiveness while also revealing opportunities for crime prevention and community improvement. Detective Angela Foster's recent reports demonstrated how modern police work could incorporate historical neighborhood knowledge with contemporary technology and analytical techniques to create comprehensive approaches to community safety that addressed both immediate concerns and long-term development needs. Foster's innovation was developing geographic information systems that could map crime patterns against historical neighborhood data, infrastructure conditions, and social service availability to identify opportunities for targeted intervention and prevention. Her approach demonstrated how police work could benefit from understanding neighborhoods as complex systems rather than simply locations where crimes occurred. The neighborhood archives had revealed police work as fundamentally geographical, involving understanding of place and community that enhanced both crime prevention and law enforcement effectiveness. The officers whose work was documented in these files understood themselves as stewards of community safety and development, rather than simply responders to criminal incidents. As Chun prepared to close her 8th night in the archives, she reflected on how the neighborhood-focused files revealed the city itself as both setting and participant in the ongoing story of community safety and social development. Each neighborhood documented in police reports carried accumulated history that influenced current conditions and future possibilities for community welfare and public safety. The archives had provided another perspective on the complexity and importance of police work, showing how effective law enforcement required understanding of community development, urban planning, and social change that occurred over decades and generations. Tomorrow night, she would conclude her exploration with the final volume, perhaps focusing on how all these accumulated files and memories created a comprehensive archive of community life and police service that preserved institutional knowledge while also pointing toward future possibilities for community safety and welfare. Detective Chun's 9th and final night in the archives brought her to the deepest section of the filing system, where the oldest closed cases rested in permanent storage, their investigations complete, their suspects prosecuted or deceased, their victims long since healed or departed. These final files represented the culmination of police work, cases resolved and documented, sealed and stored, transformed from active investigations into institutional memory that would endure long after the officers who created them had retired. The closed case files occupied the archive's most secure section, where temperature and humidity controls preserved documents that had achieved historical status through the simple passage of time. These cases, some dating back to the department's earliest days, had been deemed significant enough to warrant permanent preservation, creating a repository of police work that served as both institutional memory and community history. Detective Harold Morrison's final case report, filed in 1995 after his retirement, represented the careful closure of investigations that had defined his career. His meticulous documentation style, which had characterized his work since the early 1970s, culminated in comprehensive case summaries that provided complete narratives of investigations from initial call through final resolution. Morrison's approach to case closure treated each file as a complete story that could stand alone as testimony to both the crime it documented and the police work it represented. Morrison's final burglary investigation demonstrated his understanding that case closure required not just legal resolution, but community healing, and institutional learning. His report included detailed analysis of what the investigation had revealed about neighborhood conditions, police procedures, and community resources that could inform future police work and crime prevention efforts. His case closure created both ending and beginning, completing one story while providing foundation for continued community safety. Worked out the formal ceremony surrounding Morrison's retirement and case closure was documented in department files that revealed how police work created not just individual, professional accomplishments, but collective institutional memory that enhanced overall department capability and community service. Morrison's career-spanning documentation provided training resources, procedural examples, and community knowledge that continued to benefit police work long after his personal service had ended. Detective Patricia Wells's final domestic violence case, resolved in 1998, illustrated how case closure could provide healing and resolution for victims and families, while also creating precedents and procedures that improved police response to similar situations. Wells's comprehensive documentation of intervention strategies, resource coordination, and follow-up procedures created template for addressing complex family situations that required long-term police involvement and community support. Wells's approach to case closure emphasized the importance of ensuring that legal resolution supported rather than undermined ongoing family stability and community welfare. Her final reports documented not just prosecution outcomes, but family progress, community resource utilization, and police procedure improvements that emerged from careful attention to case development and resolution. Over time, the success of Wells's family-centered approach was documented in follow-up reports that tracked affected families for years after initial police intervention, showing how effective case closure could create positive outcomes that extended far beyond immediate legal requirements. Her work demonstrated how police effectiveness could be measured not just in prosecution rates, but in community welfare improvements that resulted from comprehensive police service. Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez's final administrative report, completed in 2001, documented the implementation of department-wide procedures for case closure and file management that ensured institutional memory preservation while also protecting privacy and maintaining security for sensitive information. Rodriguez's systematic approach to archive management created foundation for the preservation of police knowledge that enabled institutional learning and continuous improvement. Rodriguez's innovation was developing file closure procedures that balanced historical preservation with practical storage limitations and legal requirements for document retention and disposal. Her protocols ensured that significant cases would be preserved for future reference while also managing archive space and maintaining security for sensitive information that required ongoing protection. The implementation of Rodriguez's archive management system was documented in improved case retrieval capabilities, better institutional memory preservation, and enhanced training resources that enabled new officers to learn from historical examples while also providing experienced officers with reference materials for addressing contemporary challenges. Detective Michael Santos's final cold case resolution, achieved in 2003 through DNA evidence analysis, demonstrated how archived cases could provide opportunities for justice, even decades after initial investigations had reached apparent dead ends. Santos's systematic review of unsolved cases showed how improved technology and analytical techniques could create new possibilities for case closure and community healing. Santos's approach to cold case investigation emphasized the importance of maintaining comprehensive case files that could support future investigation efforts even when initial attempts had been unsuccessful. His work showed how careful Documentation and evidence preservation could enable justice across extended time periods while also providing closure for victims' families and community members who had been affected by unsolved crimes. The resolution of Santos's cold case created not just legal closure, but community healing that had been delayed for decades. His documentation of the case resolution process included careful attention to victim family notification, community communication, and media relations that ensured appropriate respect for all affected parties, while also demonstrating police commitment to pursuing justice regardless of time constraints. Detective Lisa Park's final case report, completed in 2005, documented the successful resolution of a complex fraud investigation that had required coordination among multiple agencies and jurisdictions over several years. Park's comprehensive documentation demonstrated how contemporary police work often involved collaboration and resource sharing that created new models for effective law enforcement while maintaining local community focus and accountability. Park's approach to multi-jurisdictional case coordination emphasized the importance of maintaining clear documentation and communication protocols that enabled effective collaboration while preserving case integrity and legal admissibility. Her work provided foundation for department policies regarding interagency cooperation that enhanced overall police capability while maintaining professional standards and community accountability. The success of Park's collaborative approach was documented in successful prosecution outcomes, improved interagency relationships, and enhanced department capability for addressing complex cases that required specialized resources and expertise. Her work demonstrated how modern police effectiveness could be enhanced through strategic partnerships, while maintaining focus on community service and public safety. As Chun read through these final case files, she began to understand how case closure represented both ending and transformation, converting active investigations into institutional memory that could inform and improve future police work. The most effective case closures provided not just legal resolution, but learning opportunities that enhanced department capability and community safety. The closed case files also revealed how police work created lasting impact that extended far beyond immediate law enforcement activities. Each resolved case contributed to community safety, institutional knowledge, and social welfare in ways that accumulated over time to create comprehensive public service that enhanced overall community welfare and quality of life. Detective Robert Kim's final case documentation, completed before his 2007 retirement, included comprehensive analysis of how police work had evolved during his career and what changes he anticipated would affect future law enforcement challenges and opportunities. Kim's reflective approach to case closure created not just individual case resolution, but institutional wisdom that could guide department adaptation to changing social and technological conditions. Kim's career retrospective documented how community-oriented police work had evolved from innovative experiment to standard practice, showing how effective police procedures developed through trial and error, community feedback, and continuous professional development. His analysis provided foundation for training programs and policy development that ensured continuity of effective practices while also enabling adaptation to new challenges and opportunities. The wisdom documented in Kim's final reports demonstrated how experienced officers could contribute to institutional development through careful reflection on career experiences and systematic analysis of what approaches had proven most effective for achieving police goals while maintaining community trust and professional integrity. Detective Jennifer Liu's final case closure, achieved in 2008, involved resolution of a juvenile case that had required years of family intervention, community coordination, and court involvement to achieve successful outcomes for all affected parties. Liu's documentation demonstrated how some police cases required patience and persistence over extended periods to achieve resolution that supported, rather than undermined, community welfare and family stability. Liu's approach to complex juvenile cases emphasized the importance of maintaining long-term perspective and commitment to positive outcomes even when immediate resolution was not possible. Her work showed how police effectiveness sometimes required sustained engagement over months or years to create conditions for successful case closure and community healing. The success of Liu's patient approach was documented in positive outcomes for affected juveniles and families, improved community relations, and enhanced department capability for addressing complex social issues that required coordinated intervention from multiple agencies and organizations. Her work provided examples of how police effectiveness could be enhanced through commitment to comprehensive service and community welfare. The final section of the archives contained files that documented the ongoing process of case closure and institutional memory preservation that continued to occur as Detective Chun conducted her nightly reading. These contemporary files showed how current police work built upon the foundation of knowledge and experience preserved in the historical archives, while also adapting to new challenges and opportunities that reflected changing social conditions and technological capabilities. Sergeant David Martinez's recent case closure documentation demonstrated how modern police work incorporated lessons learned from historical examples while also developing new approaches to contemporary challenges that had not existed during earlier periods. Martinez's work showed how institutional memory could inform innovation, while also preserving effective practices that remained valuable despite changing circumstances. The integration of historical knowledge with contemporary practice was documented in improved case outcomes, better community relations, and enhanced officer satisfaction that resulted from understanding police work as part of ongoing professional tradition that connected current officers with decades of dedicated public service and community commitment. Officer Maria Santos's current case documentation demonstrated how new officers could benefit from access to historical archives and institutional memory while also contributing fresh perspectives and innovative approaches that enhanced overall department capability. Santos's work showed how institutional learning required both preservation of effective practices and openness to new ideas and methods. The archives had documented not just individual cases, but the evolution of police work as profession and public service that adapted to changing community needs while maintaining fundamental commitments to justice, safety, and community welfare. Each file represented dedication to public service that connected individual officers with larger institutional mission and community purpose. As Chun prepared to close her final night in the archives, she reflected on the complete cycle of police work that she had observed through her systematic reading of decades of case files. From initial calls and investigations through prosecution and closure, each case represented commitment to community service that extended far beyond immediate law enforcement requirements to encompass comprehensive public safety and social welfare. The archives had revealed police work as both individual professional accomplishment and collective institutional mission that created lasting positive impact on community life and social welfare. The files she had read documented thousands of officers who had dedicated their careers to public service, creating accumulated knowledge and institutional wisdom that continued to benefit community safety and police effectiveness. The silence of the archives had provided sanctuary for understanding the complexity and importance of police work while also offering perspective on her own role in continuing this tradition of public service and community commitment. Each night spent among these files had deepened her appreciation for the profession she had chosen, while also providing knowledge and inspiration that would inform her own career development, and service to community welfare. The final filing cabinet closed with the same soft whisper that had welcomed her on her first night, but now the sound carried different meaning. It was not just the mechanical operation of metal and wood, but the patient preservation of institutional memory and community history that would continue long after her own career had ended, adding new files and new stories to the continuing narrative of police service and community safety. The city outside continued its eternal rotation between day and night, its citizens sleeping peacefully under the protection of officers who maintained vigilant watch, their work guided by the accumulated wisdom and institutional knowledge preserved in these quiet archives. The files rested in their patient silence, holding their stories and lessons until the next person would remember to listen, to learn, and to carry forward the tradition of dedicated public service that connected each generation of officers with all those who had served before. In the end, the archives themselves had become the true witnesses, preserving not just individual cases, but the ongoing story of community, safety, and police service that would continue long after current officers had retired, and new challenges had replaced contemporary concerns. The files held their secrets not in silence, but in patient waiting for those who would take time to listen and learn from the accumulated wisdom of dedicated public servants who had chosen to spend their careers in service to community welfare and public safety. The archives slept, but they did not rest. They continued their quiet work of preservation and memory, holding space for the stories that connected past and future, individual service and institutional mission, personal dedication and community welfare. And in their patient silence, they offered both sanctuary and inspiration for all who would choose to continue the essential work of protecting and serving the communities that depended upon their dedication and skill. Asterisk Detective Chun's return to the archives came not from duty or curiosity, but from a deeper recognition that her 9 nights among the files had only scratched the surface of the institutional memory preserved within these quiet walls. The department's records extended beyond formal case files into territories she had not yet explored, the personal logs and informal documentation that officers had maintained throughout their careers, creating parallel archives of experience and reflection that existed alongside official reports. The personal papers section occupied a smaller room adjacent to the main archives, accessible through a door she had noticed but never opened during her previous visits. These files contained the private documentation that officers had donated to the department upon retirement, personal notebooks, reflection journals, and informal case notes that provided intimate perspectives on police work unavailable in official reports. Lieutenant William Hayes's personal files, donated after his 2010 retirement, provided the first glimpse into this more personal dimension of police documentation. Hayes had maintained detailed personal logs throughout his 30-year career, recording not just official activities, but his thoughts, concerns, and observations about police work and community life that he could not include in formal reports. Hayes's personal notebooks revealed the internal experience of police work, the uncertainty and doubt that accompanied difficult decisions, the satisfaction and frustration that marked daily activities, the gradual accumulation of wisdom and perspective that came through decades of community service. His private reflections created a more complete picture of police experience than could be captured in official documentation. A lone.a particularly revealing entry from Hayes's 1985 notebook described his response to a domestic violence call that had required careful intervention to protect victim safety while maintaining respect for family, autonomy, and cultural traditions. His official report documented the facts and resolution of the incident, but his personal notes revealed the complex emotional and professional challenges that the case had presented. Hayes's private reflection included his concerns about the adequacy of available social services, his uncertainty about the long-term effectiveness of his intervention, and his ongoing worry about the family's welfare. His personal documentation revealed the weight of responsibility that officers carried beyond their official duties, showing how police work affected individual officers while also demonstrating their commitment to community welfare that extended far beyond formal requirements. Personal files also contained correspondence between officers that revealed how police work created professional relationships and mutual support networks that enhanced both individual effectiveness and collective capability. Detective Patricia Wells's letters to colleagues, preserved in her donated papers, showed how officers shared knowledge, sought advice, and provided emotional support that enabled them to maintain effectiveness and professional satisfaction throughout demanding careers. Wells's correspondence with Detective Michael Santos, spanning nearly 2 decades, documented their collaborative approach to complex cases and their shared commitment to community-oriented police work. Their letters revealed how professional relationships among officers created opportunities for learning and development that enhanced both individual careers and overall department capability. The personal archives also contained creative writing and artistic work that officers had produced as means of processing and reflecting on their professional experiences. Officer Jennifer Kim's poetry, written during her night shift hours in the 1990s, provided unique perspective on police work that captured emotional and spiritual dimensions of community service unavailable in formal documentation. Kim's poems described the particular beauty and solitude of night patrol, the sacred responsibility of protecting sleeping communities, and the complex relationships between officers and the citizens they served. Her creative work revealed police experience as fundamentally human endeavor that involved not just professional skill but personal dedication and emotional investment in community welfare. The artistic documentation in the personal archives included photography, sketches, and written observations that officers had created during off-duty hours, but which reflected their professional experiences and community connections. These creative works provided alternative perspectives on police work that complemented official documentation while also revealing the personal impact of community service on individual officers. Detective Robert Martinez's sketches of neighborhood scenes, drawn during his patrols in the 1980s, captured details of community life that formal reports could not preserve. His artistic documentation showed how officers developed intimate knowledge of their assigned areas that enhanced both police effectiveness and personal connection to community welfare. The personal files also revealed how officers' families and personal lives were affected by police work, creating networks of support and understanding that extended beyond the department to include spouses, children, and extended families who participated in the police community. These personal connections created additional layers of institutional memory and community relationship that enhanced overall police effectiveness. Officer Lisa Park's family correspondence, included in her donated papers, showed how police families developed understanding of and commitment to community service that supported officers' professional effectiveness while also creating personal costs and benefits that affected family life and individual well-being. The letters revealed police work as family endeavor that required understanding and sacrifice from multiple people beyond the uniformed officer. The informal documentation also included training materials, educational resources, and professional development activities that officers had pursued independently to enhance their knowledge and skills. These materials revealed police work as requiring continuous learning and adaptation that extended far beyond formal Training requirements to encompass ongoing professional and personal development. Detective Angela Rodriguez's personal library, cataloged in her donated materials, included books on psychology, social work, urban planning, and community development that had informed her approach to police work. Her reading materials and personal notes revealed how effective officers drew upon multiple disciplines and knowledge sources to enhance their professional capability and community service. The breadth of Rodriguez's intellectual interests demonstrated how police work required interdisciplinary knowledge and continuous learning that enabled officers to address complex community challenges while maintaining effectiveness in law enforcement responsibilities. Her personal development activities created expertise that benefited not just her individual career, but overall department capability and community service. The personal archives also contain documentation of officers' volunteer activities and community involvement that extended beyond their professional duties to encompass broader civic engagement and community service. These materials revealed how police officers often became community leaders and advocates who contributed to community welfare through multiple channels beyond formal law enforcement activities. Sergeant David Liu's volunteer work with youth organizations, documented in his personal files, showed how officers' community involvement created additional opportunities for crime prevention and community building, while also providing personal satisfaction and professional development that enhanced overall police effectiveness. Community involvement documented in these personal files revealed police work as part of broader civic engagement that connected officers with community members through multiple relationships and activities that enhanced mutual understanding and cooperation, while supporting both public safety and community welfare. The personal documentation also included officers' reflections on career transitions, retirement planning, and legacy considerations that revealed how police careers were understood as contributing to larger institutional mission and community service that extended beyond individual professional accomplishment to encompass collective impact and ongoing institutional development. Detective Michael Foster's retirement planning documents, found among his personal papers, included careful analysis of how his career experience could be preserved and transmitted to younger officers through mentoring, training, and knowledge sharing that would continue his contribution to police effectiveness and community service beyond his active career. Foster's approach to career transition demonstrated how experienced officers understood their responsibility for institutional development and knowledge preservation that would benefit future police work and community safety. His personal planning created framework for ensuring that career experience would continue to contribute to police effectiveness through multiple channels and activities. The personal archives revealed dimension of police work that official documentation could not capture. The emotional investment, personal sacrifice, creative expression, and community commitment that motivated effective police service, while also creating personal fulfillment and professional satisfaction that sustained officers throughout demanding careers. Reading these personal files, Chun began to understand how police work created not just professional accomplishment, but personal transformation and community connection that affected officers' entire lives while also contributing to institutional culture and community relationship that enhanced overall police effectiveness and community welfare. The informal documentation showed how police experience accumulated not just as professional knowledge, but as personal wisdom and community understanding that enabled effective service, while also creating lasting impact on both individual officers and community members who benefited from their dedication and skill. As Chun prepared to close this additional exploration of the archives, she reflected on how the personal papers had revealed police work as fundamentally human endeavor that engaged whole persons rather than just professional skills, creating lasting relationships and community connections that extended far beyond formal duties to encompass comprehensive civic engagement and personal commitment. The personal archives had provided final perspective on the complexity and importance of police work, showing how effective community service required not just professional competence but personal dedication and emotional investment that connected officers with community members through relationships of mutual respect and shared commitment to community welfare and public safety. The silence of the archives continued to provide sanctuary for understanding and reflection. But now Chun recognized that this sanctuary was not separate from active police work, but part of the ongoing cycle of service, reflection, and renewal that enabled officers to maintain effectiveness and commitment throughout careers dedicated to community service and public safety. The files rested in their patient preservation, holding not just institutional memory, but personal testimony to the dedication and sacrifice that characterized effective police work, waiting for future officers who would need inspiration and guidance for continuing the essential work of protecting and serving communities that depended upon their professional skill and personal commitment. In the gentle quiet of the archives, surrounded by decades of documented service and personal testimony, Chun understood that her own career was part of continuing story that connected individual dedication with institutional mission, personal growth with community service, and professional accomplishment with civic engagement that would endure long after her own service had ended, adding new chapters to the ongoing narrative of police dedication and community welfare that these archives preserved and protected.